This video is a completion of my Quake II retrospective previously released in parts. If you've already seen one or both of these videos, then feel free to re-immerse yourself in the experience as a completed retrospective of Quake II. Timestamps have been added to the description for your convenience. If you're new to the channel, then strap in and I hope you enjoy the video. I am an avid Quake II defender, and I have been for a while now. Don't get me wrong, Quake I is iconic. It's a genuine diamond in the rough considering the development cycle it overcame, but the extreme differences between Quake I and II have caused a lot of unfair vitriol to fall in the undeserving direction of Quake II. First off, let me just say this now. Quake II has atmosphere, and it has it in droves. This game is overflowing with aura and atmosphere, the likes of which most other games at the time couldn't even come close to. Hell, most modern games can't even come close to it. The weird narrative that's been floating around for decades that this game has no atmosphere compared to the first game is both unfounded and incorrect. To the surface level Quake II consumer, I can see how this game might just look like a cheap science fiction first-person shooter. I mean, it sports a synth-based heavy metal soundtrack, cyborg aliens, futuristic firearm designs, and it even had the audacity to feature a coherent plot. Imagine that. But when you actually play through Quake II past the first few missions, what you find is an intensely horrific Cronenberg-level body horror story overlaying a pulse-poundingly intense first-person shooter experience. Quake I is brilliant. I've gushed over it repeatedly and it deserves its praise, but I feel like Quake II deserves more love than it gets, although I've noticed this tide beginning to turn for a few years now. Whereas Quake I was abstract and otherworldly, Quake II is outright grotesque, but in a good way. It also wasn't even supposed to be called Quake II. See, Quake II released roughly a year and a half after Quake I did, which means this game probably saw an overall development time of like a year and 6 months. Which is a bit of an odd choice when I feel like they could have just given themselves a full 2 years to develop the game. Like, why not just take a few extra months to really dive in on what could be possible with it? They didn't have any shareholders to please, they owned the company themselves. idSoftware was totally self-funded at the time. I only have two guesses for that. One is that they wanted to release Quake II as soon as feasibly possible to show off the capabilities of the Quake II engine while it was still so far ahead of its competitors, and two, they were concerned that flirting with ambitions of a more sophisticated game might cause feature creep and result in indefinite delays and potentially even the release of an unfinished product. I'm getting to that one, we're not there yet. Despite how vastly different from its predecessor Quake II was, the two games did in fact share one major commonality, and that was a somewhat tumultuous early development cycle. When it comes to Quake II, and really just early idSoftware games in general, there's an immense amount of speculative drama surrounding different things that were happening at the company, and accusations of things some people may have been doing to other people, etc, etc. Honestly, it's hard to even tell which of the old guard of idSoftware even like each other anymore. I mean, I don't think Romero is crazy about Peterson, nor does it seem many of them get on with Tim Willits, although based on this comment from American McGee on a Sandy Peterson video, it would seem McGee still likes Peterson, and who knows where Carmack stands with anyone. Either Carmack for that matter. Not to mention that the development cycles on these games were probably bordering on inhumane to the point where I can see why it would drive a small room full of developers into vitriol.
Experiencing this crazy sense of relief because I was no longer in a situation where I was expected to go and work for 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. And remember, that was the default.
And I don't think he's exaggerating about that 18-hour days comment either, given that John Carmack himself said in an interview only a few years ago that he still works 13 hours a day and that he had found working longer hours reduced his efficacy, which means he learned that from experience. Seems pretty safe to say that working at idSoftware back then was likely closer to a nightmare than a dream. I mean, like I said before, Quake II wasn't even supposed to be called Quake II at all. In fact, throughout a portion of its early development, the team was struggling to find a good title they could use. A few examples of some of their new title ideas include Strog, Lock and Load, and most infamously, War with an O. Of course, they eventually settled on just calling it Quake II. Another major difference between Quake 1 and 2 is the fact that Quake 2 actually had a proper project manager in Kevin Cloud, who monitored and ensured the direction of the game and added a much-needed layer of structure to the project. From what I understand, Quake 1 did not have a project manager, which resulted in much of the abstract, quite frankly directionless tone and progression of the game. That issue has been resolved here though, as Quake 2 features a coherent plot paired with a cohesive atmosphere and setting for players to invest themselves into as they experience the game. And there were actually multiple different avenues for players to experience Quake 2 across 3 different versions of the game. Okay, so that whole Quake 2 generated frame by AI and being playable in a browser drama happened while I was already in the middle of this video's production, and I didn't really have a place in the outline to talk about it, so I'm just putting it here. I'm a video game YouTuber, okay, so I'm not really qualified to talk about the logistics of AI's development or direction, nor am I in any position to soapbox or speculate about anything related to either it or how it'll affect future industries beyond my own opinions. Whether the intention of AI is to be an object to exploit and replace people, or a useful tool to empower them, such as John Carmack, the creator of Quake 2's own technology, claims, I only care about where it all ends up, in spite of whatever intentions may have paved the way to that destination. The Quake 2 AI build itself isn't really playable, and it's completely an experiment to further research into the technology. A loose, fairly inconsistent version of the first area from the game does generate, but the build is only playable for roughly a minute or so before it has to force a reset, I assume because it can't generate any further. That's all I really have to say about it, to be honest, but I felt like I needed to at least bring it up given this is a video about Quake 2 and all. Anyways, back to the actual video. Of course, the one true real Quake 2 is the PC version featuring the definitive story and levels, but there were also 2 notable ports released in 1999 that saw Quake arrive on the Nintendo 64 and the Sony PlayStation. I have a good bit to say about these ports, so I'll talk more in depth about them later on in their own sections, but just keep in mind that these are both quite a bit different from the PC version, with one even being basically a completely different game. Then, in 2004, with the release of Quake IV, an Xbox 360 port of Quake 2 was included on a bonus disc that allowed players to experience the game in higher fidelity right there on the Xbox 360, and even featured system link compatibility for up to 16 players. Oh, and it was also ported to the Zeebo back in 2009. Anyway, fast forward to 2019, where Nvidia integrated full-fledged ray tracing capabilities into a source port of Quake 2 and released it officially as Quake II RTX. Although, I think it's important to note that this version of the game is more of a novelty/ray tracing tech demo than a viable way to experience the game. In a lot of ways, it does look incredible. The way the lighting makes everything look so defined is really breathtaking. But there is quite a bit lost here with these changes, and the RTX actually worsens the experience in some ways. For example, as many people have already pointed out repeatedly about ray tracing, it makes everything look unbelievably shiny and clean, which does remove an immense amount of the grit from Quake 2's atmosphere. Quake 2 isn't a clean game. It's supposed to be gross and nasty, so the ray tracing outright compromises one of the key components of its art style and design. Also, the new high-resolution skybox, that's enabled by default, by the way, totally changes the way literally every single outdoor area looks and feels. You can disable it in the settings by switching the skybox to an Earth variation or back to the original skybox, but the gall to not only call this skybox Strogos in the menu, but then enable it by default is mind-boggling. Although, to be fair, I see what they were going for by letting you change the time of day, the sun elevation, the presence of clouds. Like, this is super cool, but I'm just salty because I wish they could have made it look more like the original Strogos. Like, it's not even the same planet. Also, if you play with the new Strogos skybox, both the city and the big gun are straight up just not there, which, given half the game is centered around getting to and destroying said big gun, that's a pretty major issue. Not to mention that all of the darker areas in the game are so dark that you literally cannot see anything in them thanks to the new lighting changes. I mean, Doom 3 was dark, but Quake II RTX is literally pitch black if you don't have some kind of light.
You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
They tried to rectify this by including a new tool called the flare gun that lets you fire out flares to see in dark areas, which is an amazing thing to look at, but a terrible thing to deal with in actual gameplay, especially since Quake II has a lot of dark areas. Believe it or not, I actually really do like this RTX iteration of Quake II. I know I just criticized a ton of aspects of it, but there's a lot of sections in the game that I think look downright stunning here, and I had a great time messing with it. And to be fair, the new RTX Strogo skybox in the last mission looks way better than the original game's version, and even features the planet of Strogos itself in the distance, which adds an element of scale that improves the final battle in my opinion. The thing about this version is that despite how pretty some aspects of it look, it is not now, nor has it ever been, the optimal way to play the game. At no point should this have ever been considered a stand-in for a remaster or a good introduction for first-time Quake II players, not to mention how it doesn't feature the original Sonic Mayhem soundtrack or even have any music at all. That said, it does make a fantastic novelty for prior Quake II fans to play with, and an even better tech demo for what ray tracing is actually capable of. I mean, hell, it was this version of the game that made me begin pursuing an RTX card at all back then. But it's just not a very good way to actually experience what Quake II really is, and it's an even worse way to be introduced to Quake II for first-timers. Which is why it's such a good thing that Night Dive Studios came in clutch with their 2023 release of the Quake II Enhanced Edition, which is the version I used for the majority of this video's footage. The Quake II Enhanced Edition is, in my opinion, the optimal way to experience Quake II in the modern era. First off, it was a free upgrade for anyone who already owned Quake II on Steam, which was a great show of good faith. Second, we're talking native 4K widescreen support with frame rates up to 120 frames per second, with local split screen and online crossplay functionality for both competitive and cooperative modes. There's also a ton of restored content in the remaster by way of completing features that were planned for the original Quake II but got cut due to time restraints. Things like animations and enemy behaviors, as well as a number of bug fixes and corrections that add a final layer of polish that the original release, quite frankly, needed. Not to mention that it features the entirety of Quake II's campaign restored with the original score from Sonic Mayhem, alongside both of the 1998 Quake II mission packs called The Reckoning and Ground Zero, respectively. And as if all of that wasn't enough, Machine Games returned to contribute another brand new story expansion for Quake II, aptly titled Call of the Machine, which offered players a brand new set of missions and environments to explore inside this newly polished up iteration of Quake II. As I did with Quake I, the expansions will get their own sections later, and I'll be talking exclusively about the core Quake II experience first.
Speaking of, what is Quake II even about?
Well, although Quake II does have more of a story than the first game did, I'd still say it's pretty sparse overall, as the game's main focus is still just on being as exciting of an FPS game as it can be. Even so, the plot we have to work with here starts off with a human counter-assault of the malevolent race of warmongering aliens called the Strogg, this pronunciation is canonized later, that utilize human flesh and tissue as their primary source of fuel and power. In order to protect Earth and overcome the Strogg's forces, humanity sends a fleet in to dismantle the alien military force in retaliation for a recent Strogg attack on Earth they had recently fended off. Given the observable evil of the horrific Strogg forces and the clearly justified human counter-assault to defend humanity, I assume it's only a matter of time before media literacy enthusiasts come along to inform us all about how somehow the humans are the real bad guys here. Coined as Operation Alien Overlord, a team of elite Marines are sent to the planet's surface via one-man drop pods with 4 simple objectives to complete. Establish a communication uplink, destroy the planetary defense system, disable the interplanetary gateway, and assassinate the Macron commander. And of course, as you're seeing on screen now, Quake II sets itself apart by being the first game in the series to feature a complete intro cinematic to set the stage, and it's actually fantastic. On the way down, our player character named Bitterman has his ship clipped by another Marine, causing him to lose flight control and veer way off course, which turns out to have saved his life as every single one of those other ships gets hit by an EMP that takes them out completely.
Getting clipped just saved your ass, Marine! I just lost all readings from the rest of the platoon! Try and get to the primary LZ
Something really cool about this opening is that it actually shows you the entire landscape of the area where you'll see a ton of the structures you'll be fighting your way through. That massive cannon there, that's the big gun, and it'll play a major role in the first 2 acts of this game's progression. With Bitterman being the last man standing before any of us even hit the ground, he loses complete control of the ship as he spirals out of control and crashes into a building. Welcome to the base. Instead of being broken up into episodes, Quake II splits its progression up between smaller chunks of interconnected areas called units, each of which contains multiple small locations that players are able to access fluidly in order to complete their objectives before moving on. In this case, Unit 1, titled Base, contains 3 primary areas the player must navigate with a secret optional 4th area available as well. I'd wager this opening is one of the most recognizable sequences in all of Quake's history, to be honest. I mean, the way the music pounds in rhythm with the violence and chaos creates an immediate sense of what the player is in for when they get here. The primary objective of this unit is to locate the comm center and utilize the Strug's own communication systems to link our radio with the human ships so we can receive orders from command. Already, this game is just incredible. Not only is the base being bombed repeatedly by the Terran Coalition of Man, which is a great name for a human faction, but I mean, just look at how the enemy character models fall and still fire off shots before dying, and the fact that we can jib them is just so cool. Moving on from the outer base, Bitterman enters the installation. This is where the game introduces us to something we hadn't really seen in Quake before: area backtracking. The player will have to clear this area before he can access the comm center, but after that we'll need to come back through here again to access the next area. This is a major reoccurring aspect of Quake II's level design. And while we're here, let's talk about one of the enemies we've been gunning down up to this point. A so-called processed human, the Light Guards have been Strugified to abandon their humanity and serve the enemy. There's no saving them at this point, and entire pieces of their body have been removed and replaced, leaving the best option for us to take being their immediate execution. They're a weaker enemy and not all that threatening, but can still be trouble if you're low on health. In the bottom of this area, we'll find an access grate that takes us into the comm center we've been looking for via an underground sewer area. We're not here to stay, however, as very near said grate is an underwater tunnel that leads us to an old abandoned elevator. This elevator will be taking us to the first secret level of the game, Lost Station. And man, I hated this map. It's got some interesting ideas here with the tram playing such a major role in the map's progression, but other than that, the layout ended up just being a bit boring to me. It's actually probably one of the only maps in the game I just don't like, but it's not a bad map. It is a great time to talk about one of the most twisted enemies in the whole game, though. That is a Strog head placed inside of a horrendous technological abomination of a drone armed with 2 blades and hyperblasters, 1 of each per side. These things tend to fly in packs of 3 and will absolutely chase you down if you try to fall back to get your bearings. Fortunately, they're not that hard to kill though. The goal of this mission is early acquisition of the super shotgun, which we're gonna want because, I mean, look at it. With that handled, we can head back to the elevator we took here and return to the comm center so we can get back to business, that business being hijacking the Strog's communications for our own use. This is a great level, by the way, and it's where Quake II is really flexing its muscles engine-wise. The immense verticality of having multiple high-polygon floors to fight against, not to mention the sheer density of the levels. There's objects, computers, barrels, crates, and all kinds of other things littering each level that causes the player to feel all that much more immersed in the world as if they're really fighting through an alien base on a foreign planet. I mean, look at this, they've even got breakable glass. After some combat, we make it to the comm center, redirect the dish, and grab the blue keycard we'll need to access the bunker, which in order to reach, we'll need to head back to the installation. I love this small degree of backtracking because again, it really makes us feel like a lone soldier stranded in an unknown place, cutting our way through the grit, learning the facility as we move forward. I would have been fine with even a little more, to be honest. It flowed so well here, although it doesn't flow quite as well in some later levels. Once we make it back into the installation, it's time to make our way deeper into the base and into the bunker.
Initiate scan. Acquiring. Acquired. Personnel located, now exiting base area.
I love these cutscenes that play in between the different units to show the player where we are in relation to the massive landscape we were shown in the opening cinematic. Not only is this a massive advancement that adds to the world building from what we saw in the first game, but the style and direction feels very inspired and in line with the world here too. The bunker is the second unit of the game, and also one of the smaller ones comprised of only 3 separate sections: the ammo depot, the supply station, and the warehouse. And of course, everything in the bunker is completely powered down, so starting in the ammo depot, we'll need to find a way to restore power to the place, with our primary objective being to destroy the Strogg logistical train. Within this level are some really great set pieces, like where I accidentally crushed 2 enemies without even realizing it. Or when we get to use a crate to smash open a wall. And the enormous amount of supply crates scattered across this level aren't just for show either. They're used to great effect as part of the actual gameplay flow and level design by hiding enemies behind them and requiring the player to use them to access upper areas. Also, I like this flooded area of the map. Stuff like this adds so much personality to these old games. Just like we've been talking about, this ammo depot is also a small hub that we'll end up backtracking through at a later point, as we can see by this walkway that shows us 2 different directions to travel. One taking us to the supply station, and the other to the warehouse. Of course, we'll need to head into the supply station first. The fact that we can read all of this text and these signs is not canon, I'm pretty sure, due to something we'll get into when I talk about Quake IV, but I think it's pretty easy to overlook altogether. Or hell, maybe Bitterman just learned how to read the strong language somehow. The goal of this area is to locate and obtain 4 power cubes, which are like small batteries used to grant power to the given area in which they are placed. We have to go through a few of these guys before we reach the train, where we can grab 2 of the power cubes we need to progress. With those in hand and the train offline, all we have left to do here is find the other 2 power cubes and make our way back to the warehouse, which again will take us back through the ammo depot briefly before we head through the warehouse door. The warehouse is actually a pretty short level, honestly, as we fight through a short series of rooms littered with crates, which, I mean, duh, it's a warehouse. I really love the bit near the end of the section where we have to interact with the world to have it drop an explosive crate in front of the door to blow our way inside. This was so next level back then, dude. Also, have I talked about the fact that you can literally, and I do mean literally, blow people's heads off in this game? Another notable thing about the warehouse is that it marks the first appearance of the tank. Massive, slow-moving, and fairly dangerous, these technological terrors sport a blaster on one arm and a machine gun on the other, with a rocket launcher mounted to their shoulder as they stomp around threateningly. But luckily, their speed is a pretty massive weakness and really inhibits how much of a threat they can be, especially with quad damage on. With the warehouse cleared, we can move on into Unit 3, where the game starts throwing even bigger areas at us to deal with.
Initiate scan. Acquired. Personnel located.
In my opinion, Unit 3 is where the game really starts, whereas Units 1 and 2 kind of feel like they're letting you get the swing of things. From here on out, the game is doubling down on all of the elements it's been introducing to the player so far. It's also where things start to become different. Quake II has garnered a bit of an unfair reputation for just being a series of tech-based aesthetic missions from start to finish until credits roll, with a distinct lack of variety compared to the first game. But inside of this sci-fi tech base, a surprisingly grotesque and brutal narrative is told about the enemy we're facing and what they're doing to humans. The objective here is to fight through the jail complex and gain access to the main computer so we can destroy it, thereby shutting down the security grid. The area you're seeing is the main gate, and although it's on the smaller side of the game's areas, it also still has several interesting set pieces, like this laser trap floor and this massive anti-air turret guarding the aforementioned main gate into the jail. The dreary, gray, hopeless color palette on display here is setting the tone for what is to come, by the way. So in order to break into the Strogg jail complex, we redirect the big AA gun to point at the main gate and blow it open. Which leads us straight into the detention center. Here is where we'll have to locate a keycard that we'll need to progress into the security complex, and it's also a great time to talk about what I'd call one of the most annoying enemies in the whole game. With what little of a man's torso remains attached to mechanized bipedal legs with a railgun forcibly integrated into its right arm, these things are one of the more contentious Strogg to wrestle with, primarily due to the aforementioned railgun. If they manage to hit you with one of those railgun shots, it'll knock a massive chunk of your health and armor off, which is what makes them so deadly to deal with. This is also where we get a glimpse of various other Marines being held captive in these cells. We can free them by disabling the energy fields, but it becomes quickly apparent that these men are too far gone to save. You can leave them be or put them out of their misery. It's the player's call, but killing them does grant you items. After this, we move on to the security complex. Rather than either of the two areas we just passed through, it's this one that acts as the main hub of Unit 3 that we'll be moving through multiple times as we clear the unit and get what we need. You can see there's 3 different directions we can go, all 3 of which lead to different areas. 2 of these will be inaccessible at first, but when the player finds the red key, they can head back to the detention center and disable the yellow lasers blocking their path. You'll also find one of the coolest structures in the game here by pushing straight through the middle of the map until you see the pyramid. This thing is going to be important later, but we can't access it without the so-called pyramid key. So for now, we head back the way we came, fight our way back through a newly accessible section of the detention center, disable the yellow lasers, head back to the security complex again to make our way towards the next area. I love the fact that we can find another Marine's pod here to remind us of that opening cinematic through this kind of environmental storytelling. This would be the worst possible place to end up landing too, since the dude got out of his pod and found himself right beside the front door of the Strog's jail unit guardhouse. This is where the Strog are keeping the pyramid key we need, and it's also, as the name implies, crawling with guards and various enemies to fight through. It's got some great sections where we can see various other parts of this whole facility in the distance thanks to the really great skybox they put together for the game. Not to mention the variety of having these more rustic stone texture walls, spike pit traps that have clearly worked on other Marines, and even a small area where lava has spilled in and is damaging the structure's foundation. This is also the first appearance of a particularly reptilian-looking enemy. This mutant isn't actually a Strog and is rather considered to be local fauna of the planet Strogos. They have no cybernetic implants or enhancements and are just large leathery beasts that chase after you and try to smack you around. You could probably think of them kind of like massive Strog attack dogs or something like that. Once we get to the end of the area, we can grab a new weapon called the Hyper Blaster, which goes super hard and is one of my favorites in the game. I'll talk more about all of the weapons later on, but I'll just briefly mention a few of the more notable ones when the player gets access to them. With the pyramid key in hand, we can head back to the security complex and towards that other entrance on the other side of said complex, where we'll activate a bridge and move down into the exact area where I fully realized that this game does indeed have some incredible atmosphere. This was it for me. Seeing the shadow of this dead Marine hanging from the ceiling in between these 2 pillars above a pool of lava is where I finally said to myself that this game has some very deliberately designed atmosphere. Heading through the door, we enter into the next area called the Torture Chambers. The game's just being straight up with its naming scheme at this point, I know, and it's accurate too because these very much are literally torture chambers. Somewhere down here is a CD we need to find, and it's so charming to me that at the time of this game's development, they really thought CDs would stand the test of time like this. Of course, they very much did not. The fact that we have to take this sinister elevator down into these stone catacombs really sets up the atmosphere for what the player is about to encounter down here. And while we're down here, we can confront another of the game's more common enemies. You'll be seeing a lot of these guys, and with very little humanoid left to see, they're basically all machine now. Their right arm has been replaced with a machine gun, and their left a grenade launcher. These are very well known to be one of, if not the most common enemy in the game, and they're pretty deadly overall due to their durability and weapon versatility. As for the torture chambers themselves, I think the best thing to do here is just show off the brutality of the things we'll be seeing. Like this table with a massive saw suspended above it that we can assume lowers onto the subject. Or how about this, Iron Maiden thing? The game makes us use this on him, by the way.
No. No. No.
It even cuts the music after you do it too, so you have to sit there in silence and deal with what you just did. Which it does every time you complete your objective in a given area, but still, this was so intentionally timed. Or you could just shoot him, I guess. Anyway, with the pass card we needed in hand, we can head back up to the security complex and access the pyramid. On the way there, we pass a cage we can lower into lava to kill this poor Marine, which of course I just put him out of his misery instead. With that done, we head back up and make our way to the pyramid that we then open up so we can descend down into grid control. This is a particularly short section to end off the unit, but it does look super cool. I mean, the cybernetic aesthetic of it is a great juxtaposition to the more brutalist look of the environments we just left. And this is one of those areas that looks great in the RTX build too, but I still prefer the remaster here personally. After some well-timed movement through the various laser traps of the pyramid's interior, we find ourselves in a boss fight arena as we tackle 2 different tanks before the ground starts shaking and out comes a new opponent for us to face down. Although it's treated as a kind of boss battle here to end off Unit 3, this enemy does reappear one more time later on and is technically just another Strogg enemy type, albeit a very rare and powerful one. With a torso sporting a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher and a minigun built into its right arm, this tread-mounted monster is one very high HP beast to reckon with. And it's a really fun little arena battle to throw players back to the classic circle strafe boss battles of the past titles that preceded this one. Of course, I just threw on a quad damage and insta-killed the thing with a grenade launcher at some point before moving on to destroy the security grid and escape the pyramid. We've got a lot of ground to cover after all.
Initiate scan. Acquiring. Acquire personnel located.
The mines are probably my least favorite set of levels across the game's offerings. That isn't to say they're bad or anything, I just found them to be a bit gratuitous and repetitive after a while, and they're also kind of long on top of that. We're not quite into said mines yet though, because we actually start Unit 4 outside of the factory we're trying to gain access to, but unfortunately, it seems like they locked the front door, which is kind of a rude way to treat your guests, to be honest. We don't really have a set objective here beyond navigating our way into and through the mines safely so we can access the aforementioned factory and continue our infiltrate and sabotage mission. It turns out we're actually very close to an active volcano, which is where all of this lava is coming from, and also explains the use of these flying enemies we've been dealing with. These poor bastards have had their arms sliced completely off, leaving only a pair of mechanized legs and a jetpack built into their torso. On each shoulder there is a blaster mounted, allowing them to fire at the player rapidly, making these guys something to keep a sharp eye out for, since they can be taking shots at you from the air where you wouldn't even see them unless you looked above you. After a bit of a trek, we find our way to the access tunnel that leads into the upper mines. Of course, I do have to point out that there's still some exceptional set pieces in these areas that make them memorable and very cool, like this rock crusher machine we see after only having been in here a short time.
I gotta do it, man.
And it's certainly more inspired than a great deal of the underground mine levels I've seen in other shooters from the time, even ones from years after Quake II had released. It's also loaded with dozens of a certain enemy we haven't talked about yet, too. Another Stroggified human brainwashed to serve. In addition to the increased endurance from their now mostly metal-based body, these guys are also packing a shotgun grafted into their very flesh that they can dish out some serious damage with if you let them get too close. This is the second of the 3 variations of human turned Strogg we'll be encountering in the game. If you're already familiar with Quake, then you know why this is relevant, but we're not there yet, so chill out. We're getting to that scene way later down the line, I promise. Near the back of the upper mines, we'll find the control panel for the ventilation system so we can deactivate them and allow access to the lower levels, which takes us down into the borehole. There's some mining machinery here that should take us deeper into the dig site once we find it, but there's also a few other cool things to see here too. Like, okay, well, it is mostly just a series of tunnels and corridors for the player to fight through in order to reach the control switches for the machinery we're here to activate. Still, all of it's super well designed though. I mean, this giant drill is pretty cool. Whatever, let's keep moving. Yeah, this enemy type is... No, I'm not ready to spurg about this one yet. We're not deep enough into the video. I'll get to these guys soon. And don't worry, we'll end up coming back here briefly later, but for now we still gotta lower this platform and kill our way through to the drilling area. More tunnels lie ahead as... Geez, that's a lot of mutants. Why do the Strogg even keep these things around? Can you imagine one of those things charging at you at full speed in real life? Horrifying. So we deal with these things and, well, there's the drill, but now how do we turn the thing on? I can tell by the texture that this floor wants me to destroy it, so... I guess that's where we're headed next. These crystals you're seeing everywhere are called stadium, and they act as the primary power source for the Strogg's technology. Can you imagine a horrifying tech-infused alien race attacking and mogging both you and your planet repeatedly just because they happen to have a supercrystal buried in their planet's crust that gives them an incredible power source that you don't have? Insane. After pushing ahead just a bit, we wind up encountering a floating trash can that is apparently a real Strogg enemy somehow. These guys are not to be underestimated despite looking like a floating 55-gallon drum of water. Each one of them sports a hyper blaster to shoot at the player along with a strong melee attack via its 2 tool arms. Depending on which angle you catch the thing at, you might get a glimpse of its face within the glass of whatever the hell they did to the poor thing currently stuck in there. Do not tell me this game is uninspired. You should have seen enough by now to know that the devs were cooking up some psychotic brilliance, and we're not even halfway through it yet. Up ahead, we find the mining laser prepped to blast open our way out of here, which turns on before we get pushed forward by a mobile mining drill. Luckily, I managed to get out of that one before I ended up splattered on the rock surface. Okay, that's it. I'm done with these damned mines, and after taking down a handful more Strogg enemies, we thankfully find the elevator exit back up to the surface again.
Initiate scan. Acquired personnel located.
Moving into the facility, our objective here is clear. Fight our way through the receiving center to gain access to the processing plant and shut it all down ASAP. We're in for a treat with this unit too, as it makes some great use of the engine. There's a lot of map interactivity across the next few areas with some brilliant layouts that are honestly very reminiscent of the way Quake I maps felt. There's a reason for that, and I'm getting to it. While we're here, we may as well talk about the third and final one of the Stroggified human enemy types. These guys have been grafted with a machine gun instead of a blaster or a shotgun, and although they never really pose much of a threat, it never feels good to kill mutilated and brainwashed versions of our own kind. Both this area and the next one are two of the more deeply atmospheric ones across the game too. The lighting is precise and brilliant. This is also the second of 3 units in the game with access to a secret level, although it's really less of a secret level and more of a bonus area. By hitting a well-timed jump, the player can leap across this gap and find a hidden area through this water that teleports us into an area called Sudden Death. This is a really simple and short bonus sequence where a small map is littered with items and ammo for players to gather up before returning to the main game, but they only have 30 seconds before they're teleported back to the bridge in front of the waterfall. From there, we can keep moving and things really get good when we finally make it to the processing plant. This was the area that made me realize what this game was really all about, and it was also when I realized that the macabre nature of Quake II's world mixed with the Quake I feeling level design of both this area and the last felt all too familiar. This is because the level design of Unit 5 was handled by American McGee, who I talked about previously having handled some of the darker maps in Quake 1. McGee is well known for his tendency to lean towards the twisted, and this unit features some of the more gruesome visuals we'll see across the game, like these pools of dismembered human body parts in whatever fluid this is, probably some kind of acid to dispose of the remaining limbs after they're cut off and replaced with mechanical limbs via the stroggification process. We see multiple chutes dumping various parts into the acid for organic disposal throughout this area as a grim reminder of how objectively reprehensible our enemy here is. Across this area, the player is tasked with shutting down a variety of machines like the organic material liquefier. Another of these machines we have to deactivate is the Strogg bioassimilation tank, so that should slow down the production of recycling human beings into soldiers for the time being at least. The disturbing nature and design of this level is absolutely critical both to the tone and story of this game, as it manages to not tell, but directly show the player how dangerous the Strogg are while reinforcing our apathy towards slaughtering them. I'm honestly choosing not to show some of the more brutal stuff from this level because YouTube doesn't like it when things get too graphic, so I'll leave it to your imagination exactly what the biocompression chamber might do, not to mention the enemy processing unit. There's less areas in Unit 5 than some of the others, but the processing plant itself is one of the bigger areas overall, along with having some of the better level design too, so it ended up being one of my favorite units across the game. Once we're done with everything here, we can head through this airlock into the next unit.
Initiate scan. Acquired personnel located.
We are nearly at the big gun now. Remember that thing? But there's still the massive power plant in our way, and since we're going to have to fight through it to get to the big gun anyway, we may as well destroy as much of the plant as we can. And we can even see the enormous superstructure way out there in the distance too, which is one of the coolest visuals of the whole game. I mean, this is absurdly over the top, and you don't see things like this anymore. Ignore the super tank down there, we'll get to him. Entering into the power plant itself, we're introduced to one of the Strog's female units, the Iron Maiden. Having had their legs and left arm completely removed and replaced by mechanical parts and a rocket launcher grafted into their shoulders, there's very little left of whatever these alien women used to be. But despite their humanoid appearance, I'm fairly confident these are still native Strog females, just after having undergone the mandatory Strogification process. They always run in pairs and have easily one of the most iconic alert sound cues of the franchise. Also, look at that mural. This is such a deliberate and interesting thing to have carved in the lobby of your power plant. I think that might represent the Macron, but it looks nothing like him, so I'm headcanoning that it's either the Strog's idea of a deity or emperor. Another fun thing about this level is that it's the first time we as the player can get our hands on the BFG 10,000. Now that we've got this oversized delete button in our arsenal, it's time to head back out to that super tank I pointed out earlier and share our new gun with him. I don't think he liked it very much. That's the only other super tank in the Quake II campaign, so we're done with those guys for good now. I like a lot of the little detail work we see across the rest of this plant, like these vents exhaling flames, and honestly just the physical design of this structure is incredible by 1997 standards, or honestly even by modern standards. Pushing forward a bit more, we find ourselves in the reactor. This area is the hub of the power plant, and we'll be coming in and out of it throughout our stay here. As we complete objectives, various changes will occur within the map itself as a direct result of the player's actions, which is really cool, but also kind of easy to miss if you're not paying attention. There's some excellent verticality going on here, where we get to battle across various levels of the structure while making our way to different areas, of which there are 4 more to cover, 3 of which are accessible directly from this hub. The outdoor parts of this area are some of my favorite too, because that comically large big gun structure is just out there reminding us of our goal every time we see it. Once we manage to gain access to the reactor's core, we can lower its shields before we make our way into the cooling facility. The mission here is to find and activate the cooling pump to lower the coolant around the reactor. The design of the level's aesthetic is very well crafted, and it features a lot of very satisfying corridor shooting as well. We can also see the towering presence of the power plant in the skybox at certain points, which is very cool. Before too long, we can drain the coolant systems and head back to the hub. Overall, it's a pretty short mission, and you'll be through it pretty quickly. Although that said, it does contain a very particular Easter egg I want to talk a little bit about. After the player has finished the area and left, if they return after destroying the reactor, a new location will be accessible that reveals the iconic idSoftware Dopefish. The original game sported a less friendly iteration of the fish, along with the message "Design is Law" to poke fun at Ion Storm, the company founded by former idSoftware employees John Romero and Tom Hall. This was changed in the 2023 remaster, however. Next up, we're headed into the toxic waste dump. Our goal here is to kill our way to pumping stations 1 and 2 so we can activate them and destroy the reactor core. This is another shorter map like the last one, and part of that is to compensate for the fact that this unit features a solid 6 different areas to fight through. And you know what? I think it's finally time to talk about one of the most common and frustrating enemies in the game. The Berserker is a predominantly mechanized, technological terror sporting a massive hammer for one arm and a sharp blade for the other. These things will chase you down to beat the bitterman right out of you, and they are seemingly everywhere. Around every corner and behind every crate, I was checking to see if one of these bastards was waiting for me. They weren't nearly as rough to reckon with in the original game, but thanks to the remaster going above and beyond to finish building out the enemy to its original intent by fulfilling the unfinished programming and animations that weren't in the 1997 retail, they can now leap across the level to close the gap between you and them and bring the literal hammer down. This leap was actually so annoying that Night Dive ended up nerfing it in the remaster's first patch due to fan feedback. I don't want to make it out like I hate them or anything. I think their challenge is a pivotal part of what made my experience so engaging, but man, dealing with them can be rough sometimes. We've still got some work to do, however, as we make our way into Pumping Station 1. Both Pumping Station 1 and 2 are their own unique areas, but both are also relatively small and straightforward, so there's really not much to say about them. We've got some fun and well-designed corridors to fight through, pretty much all of which maintains the same rusty metal level theme we've already seen plenty of at this point. It's a solid chance to test out your skills as a player, however, and cut through several dozen Strogg enemies along the way. Once we flip both switches and activate the 2 pumping stations, it's time to head back to the reactor core. Mother. Back at the reactor, we can hear the explosions from the facility literally melting down around us and even hear the chaos as well. As you see entering the building, the whole place is flooded with toxic waste, and we show up just in time to see the reactor core explode.
Computer updated.
On to the big gun.
Reactor shutdown successful. Infiltrate main planetary defense facility and destroy big gun. Airstrike standing by.
Unit 7 is easily the shortest unit of the game, comprised of but one single area, and it's a short one at that. I mean, we're here now, inside of the control room for the big gun, and our goal is, of course, to sabotage and destroy it from the inside out, which of course means we've got to get things started with a mini-boss battle. A massive mechanical insectoid thing with a humanoid torso, 2 chain guns, a rocket launcher, and even more endurance than the super tanks, these things are an outright airborne menace. Until we hit it with a number of BFG 10,000 shots, chased by some chain gun rounds anyway. I mean, smoke 'em if you got 'em, right? Alternatively, you can throw on a quad damage, which actually kills the thing even faster if you've been stocking up. With that guy out of the way, there are a number of enemies between us and the controls we need to find, including a tank, but also look at how you can see the city of Cerberon from these windows. So cool. Anyway, by locking down the laser guard, we apparently send the whole damn superstructure into a self-destruct sequence, which ends up literally giving us 30 real-life seconds to escape the thing, or it will straight up game end you by blowing you up along with it.
3, 2, 1.
Canonically though, Bitterman makes it to the tram car with time to spare.
3, 2, 1.
I'm super endeared that they made a real in-game 3D model to blow up and placed it in this setting for players to see. But also, I'm pretty sure that thing was so much bigger than that when we saw it from the ground. Still cool that they went this extra mile with it though. Our true goal now is to infiltrate Palace City so we can find and assassinate the Strogg leader called the Macron. But along the way, we'll have to pass through and shut down their hangars to immobilize their air force for a while. Not to mention seeking out and shutting down the black hole generator they've been using to push their invasions on other intergalactic colonies. The tram we took from the big gun touches down in the outer hangar. By this point, I'd figured out that the railgun was all but the most useful weapon in the game, so I'd become more than a little bit fond of it, which is why you'll be seeing a lot more of it in the footage from here on out. Also, we have some more local planetary fauna to talk about. I mean, there isn't an immense amount to say about these guys since what you see really is what you get. The Barracuda shark, a name I assume was given to them by humanity based on how they look since we don't know what the Strogg would call them, is indigenous to the planet Strogos and very hostile against anything they can find except each other, which makes them one of the few enemies that won't infight. They're also one of the only enemies totally void of any cybernetic enhancements. Now there is one more secret level in Quake II that we can access from this area via this teleporter, which literally sends us into space as we're beamed up into the comm satellite. And because I hadn't seen this level before, I somehow leapt straight out of the airlock to my death. Despite realizing my mistake in shutting this airlock, I still ended up repeating this exact mistake later in a different hangar because they place a bunch of items at the edge to lure me in like a child chasing something shiny. This is easily the best of the 3 secret levels. We've got zero gravity gameplay, a bunch of flying enemies that are fun to fight, and a spectacular skybox that lets us see the planet Strogos in space. It's a really short map, but super cool, and the fact that it's kind of easy to miss means this was probably a major treat for players back in the day when they found it on repeat playthroughs on accident. The goal here is to knock the comm satellite out to deal another blow to Strogos' planetary defenses, which has a really neat spin on the game's typical press button to complete objective loop. Instead of stepping on the floor plate like we've had to do throughout the game so far, we have to use the reduced gravity to jump into the air and press 4 different plates, which disengages the clamps and lets the dish fall into space, where it then explodes. With that done, we head back down and take the teleporter back to the outer hangar again. From here, things are about to get good, because the next area is one of my favorites from the game, the research lab. Now, when I say this is one of my favorite levels, I just mean I think it's conceptually really cool, but it's also very bleak. The first thing we see when we enter are some brain-fried, traumatized Marines walking around void of the will to fight any longer. As the name implies, this area is a lab where the Strogg perform a variety of different, very gruesome experiments on captured human subjects. It's also a great opportunity to talk about a particularly annoying enemy we haven't covered yet. These horrifying-looking abominations feature the head of a Strogg grafted into a four-legged, dog-like cyborg body, complete with a long organic tube that can stick into human opponents and drain their blood out to replenish their own health. This enemy in particular has seen a few improvements from its base game counterpart here in the remastered version. In the original game, the parasite did not replenish its own health by attacking the player, nor could it land a hit if it was on a different elevation from the player. In addition to that, the parasite can get its tube stuck in a wall if it misses the player, thus allowing for an advantageous counterattack, but this was also absent in the original game. Night Dive included it due to the existence of the animation already having been in the original game, but the feature having been cut since it wasn't completed in time for the release back in 1997. And since this enemy is so rare, and I don't really have a better place to talk about it, let's go ahead and just cover the medic too. A very ugly Strogg head mounted onto a centaur-like cybernetic body, complete with a hyperblaster mounted on its right arm. The most threatening thing about these guys is their ability to shoot their dead comrades full of whatever it is they need to get back on their feet. I.e., any enemy you don't jib could be coming back from the dead and after you if one of these guys is wandering around. By themselves, they're not overly dangerous, but they are quite durable, so it can take more than a few shots to bring them down. As for the research lab, I mean, like I said earlier, it's bleak. We hear the tortured screams and groans from broken men echoing out across the whole area as they beg to be killed or released, while having basically no sense of self due to the extreme nature of what they'd either seen or experienced. We can see some of the tables and even use some of these panels to witness some of the experiments ourselves, like the laser and saw tables. Horrifying. Our objective down here is to find the head of a tank commander unit in a repair bay and commandeer it so we can bypass a security scanner back in the outer hangar, which is where we head back to so we can bypass the locked door and gain access into the inner hangar. This is the primary base of operations for all of the Strogg spacecraft in Cerberon, and our job is to shut the hangar bay door and deliver an effective blow to the Strogg's aerial and space units. And you know what? It's past time we talk about one of the more powerful enemies in the game too. These lumbering fuse boxes of organic nightmare fuel are kind of like the Strogg's way to make use of all of the organic biomatter they can in some fashion or another. A mechanical head being its only way to see, on top of a boxy torso spilling out with various organs of Strogg and human refuse mashed into fleshy tentacles that respond neurologically to its brain. These things might be slow moving, but they're also very dangerous. In the vanilla release, they were fairly harmless as their melee attack was the only real method they had of dealing damage, but the remaster has updated them to match a later mission pack counterpart that outfits them with two different ranged attacks, including laser beams from its eyes, and a spiraling tentacle grab that it can use to drag you in for a devastating close-range blow. These guys are pretty rare overall, with less than 20 being spread across the base campaign, regardless of difficulty. Also, look at this view! It's a real shame they didn't have someone redo these skyboxes and environment models, because I can tell this would be such an incredible sight if it was touched up to look better. Still looks incredible though, don't get me wrong. I'd just love to see a version more fully realized is all. Once we take out another Hornet and flip a switch, we take an elevator back up to the surface where the game flexes on us a bit. That is the black hole generator, and we're gonna try to shut it down. Also, it's good to see our boys back in the skies thanks to our efforts to knock out the Strogg's air defenses so far. We're not outside for long though and wind up heading straight into the launch command, and this place is loaded with tank units. Seriously, there's 8 of these guys stomping around in here and they're pretty bullet spongy. It actually took me a few tries to get through this part and shut down the cooling chambers to the black hole generator CPU. I eventually just got tired of it and threw on a quad damage to start deleting these fools so I could get to all 4 cooling chambers, deactivate them, and head into the CPU room to shoot it up. That's 1 black hole generator down. Luckily, it just turned the thing off instead of opening a black hole right here or something. With that done, we begin heading for the Strogg Palace, which takes us into the Outlands. This is another smaller area to end off the unit and takes place entirely in this outdoor canyon area. Our goal is to track down an airstrike marker and plant it near a fuel pod to deal out some damage to the Strogg forces. This is also a great time for me to talk about an enemy that I haven't brought up yet, but that is very common throughout the game. These guys are the closest thing to a regular Strogg we see in the game, which is cool since it turns out they're not too dissimilar to how humans look when they're not augmented beyond all recognition. Even still, you can tell these guys have had some work done, as every Enforcer sports various cybernetic replacements across their bodies, including having the right arm outright replaced by a chain gun prosthetic. They're really not overtly dangerous or anything, but they do often tend to distract you from other more lethal enemies. In a cave, we find the airstrike marker we need on a comrade's dead body, RIP, and make our way to the fuel pod where we drop it off and await the payload.
2, 1.
Okay, so, I mean, a little underwhelming, but whatever, it's still cool. With that done, it's time to keep moving. We're almost to the palace now.
Initiate scan. Acquired personnel located.
The mission is simple, and yet it's still never been more complicated. Infiltrate the Macron's palace, fight through his horde of defenses, locate and eliminate the communication system allowing him to direct his army, and then assassinate the Macron himself. With the palace just ahead, we enter into the outer courts where a barrage of enemies are waiting for us. I guess word has been getting around. Interestingly enough, the Quake II logo itself can now be found used repeatedly across the environment as an ornate icon. It's on this exterior gate, and it's also used a lot throughout the palace interior. Makes me wonder what this symbol means to the Strogg. I mean, obviously it was just the developers thinking it'd be cool for the player to find the icon here near the end of the game, but also, you guys know how I like to get into potential lore. Once we finally pass through the massive gate, we'll find a powerful new foe waiting for us. First appearing here in Unit 9, these Goliath-like machines might just look like regular tanks with red accents, but they're actually quite a bit more durable and act as a kind of honor guard tasked with defending the inner city and palace from possible intruders. We may be getting introduced to them fairly late in the game, but they'll be showing up a lot from here on out. I also feel it necessary to point out the aesthetic design for a little bit here, because look at how spectacular this palace entrance is. All of the design for this unit was actually very impressive. There's also a data spinner we have to collect here for reprogramming in the next area. This area can have a lot of backtracking depending on how you play it, but I'll just be talking through it area by area, and up next is the lower palace. When it comes to these final two areas of Unit 9 in the lower and upper palace, I found the aesthetic design to be remarkable, but the actual level layout itself to be a little bit lacking. It's kind of confusing in places, and there feels like an uneven balance between some areas being overly elaborate and others being very simple, but that might have been the intention. The lighting is great though. There's a ton of running around and overcoming various traps like lasers coming from the walls and hidden blasters that get triggered to shoot at you when you cross their line of sight. The computer needed to reprogram that data spinner we just picked up is down here too, which is crucial to our progression. Before too long, we'll find ourselves in the upper palace where things get interesting. This final area is split into two distinct paths that each lead through different routes before ultimately wrapping back around into each other again. There's traps around literally almost every corner, ornate Strogg flags hanging from the walls, and no shortage of enemies to deal with. At the end of this, however, is the peak of the palace that opens up into a massive array where we see the Strogg communication laser, which is the very device that the Macron uses to communicate and issue orders to the Strogg forces across the planet. If we can take that thing out, we'll have secured a major victory for humanity. The only problem is, well, actually taking it out. Like I said, this last unit is pretty confusing, and will demand a lot of running around to find different areas and backtracking to fully complete. It makes the unit feel far larger than it actually is, honestly, because the two palace areas really aren't very big compared to some of the other areas, but their odd layout and required backtracking makes them feel like they are. Because after getting the CD for the communication laser, we'll need to use the data spinner to reprogram it, and the console for that is back in the lower palace. With that done, we trek back to the upper palace again to shut down the laser.
Laser neutral. Computer updated.
And with that done, our exit becomes available. Although you don't have to take it right away, since there's an entire section of this map that is basically optional and contains a lot of cool things, including a certain Easter egg called the Memorabilia Room. Pretty cool. Anyway, we have an enemy alien leader to assassinate, so let's get into this elevator and ascend into the next unit. As you see, we don't get a cool digital cutscene showing our progression into this final area, presumably because our allies have lost total sight of it, and I'm assuming we can't report into them at the moment. It's just us and the final showdown. This door gets blown open by a series of lasers before we can continue to progress, and we can hear the bombing of Cerberon has been resumed by the Terran Coalition of Man outside thanks to our efforts on the ground so far. We have to do a few things like take out these Iron Maidens and hit some buttons, but eventually we finally take the lift to see our foe face to face. Well, that's a challenge if I've ever heard one. A few final flyers come after us before we activate the teleporter, and it zaps us back up into... Well, here we are, stranded in a random space station about to single-handedly take on what we can only assume to be the most powerful Strogg there is. In traditional idSoftware boss battle build-up fashion, we're given the chance to load up on some ammo and resources a little bit before the final battle begins. Before we talk about the final battle, however, I want to point out that this level is home to a very cool idSoftware developer gallery room to look at and appreciate, and not only that, but also an additional secret room where we can see... is this the real Strogg leader, or... Anyway, if you're playing this remastered version, the secrets extend even further to an additional hidden Night Dive developer room. Very cool. I always appreciate the sheer amount of love that goes into projects like this and really like finding those little secret developer rooms. This isn't really something you see anymore, unfortunately. Anyway, taking an elevator up, we walk out to meet our foe as the battle begins. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Evan, that's not the Macron. Well, you're actually partially right. That is the Macron, but he has retreated up here to don a powerful exoskeleton suit called a Jorg. Jorg? Before facing us down in this arena. I can see why too, because the Jorg battlesuit is significantly more intimidating looking than the actual Macron, which we have to also destroy once we wear down the exoskeleton and force him to abandon it. Originating from the Greek and translating roughly to mean big thing, the Macron is simply the human code name given to this monster since, again, they offer no contact or quarter with humanity, leaving them with very little intel on what exactly they're dealing with here. Likely the most augmented of any Strogg we've seen so far, there's nothing left of the Macron but a brain wired into that massive battlesuit we're currently fighting. If we kill this thing, we kill the Strogg leader, and so that's exactly what happened here in this final arena battle witnessed only by the stars above us. Okay, cool. Well, he's dead. Now there's just a matter of our escape pod and our daring jump into freedom. And that's Quake II. All I can say is, man, what a ride. This game's narrative progression was immensely more involved and consistent than anything Quake I had ever done before at this point, featuring real world building, a coherent plot, and even a series of different objectives and tasks to complete that made you feel like you were genuinely affecting the world across each unit. Saying that isn't to slight Quake I by any means, as it was trying to achieve something very different, but rather to uplift Quake II because quite frankly, it rules. idSoftware has never really been known for their storytelling or narrative depth, so something like this is more than enough to satisfy the itch for purpose while gunning down the plethora of enemies stacked up and awaiting decimation here. The grotesque body horror nature of the Strogg as a race of purely malevolent, warmongering, augmentation-obsessed monsters makes them a perfect enemy for such an intense shooter. I feel like if it was done right, this universe could easily be expanded into a really cool movie or book or something. The Strogg are just such a good enemy faction, and I'd love to see more of them.
Quake II might not be everyone's favorite from the franchise, but it was still an absolute cultural landmark for the industry at the time.
In fact, I thought it would be pertinent to invite someone on to talk about their own experience with Quake II and tell us a little bit about what Quake II meant to them personally, and so I invited fellow content creator Under the Mayo to come on board and share his thoughts on the game.
When it was requested that I speak about Quake II, my initial reaction was, why me? I never talk about Quake, and despite being a Quake fan, there are so many other shooters I'd put over it in my personal preference. But the more I thought about it, the more I saw how right it was, because Quake II is one of the most significant titles in my childhood. While I did play a few shooters as a kid, Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, Wolfenstein, I spent much more time in the first Mortal Kombat games, strategy games like Command & Conquer, and the first survival horror games. The first Quake actually passed me by in its time. If I'd known about it, I wouldn't have even been able to play it on my dad's old work computer. But 1998, 1999 saw my family getting our first family PC, and eventually signing up for cable internet. One of my best friends, who was a big computer nerd, let me install his copy of Quake II, and it blew my mind. So Quake II was my introduction to the series, and the first shooter I played somewhat seriously. I repeated the campaign many times, and thanks to the new high-speed internet, I was playing deathmatch after school. And during school, because our telecommunications teacher actually let us install Quake II on every PC in the classroom, which turned every class period into Quake II Deathmatch class, while the teacher read magazines and the kids murdered each other listening to Nine Inch Nails and Slipknot. In fact, every lunch hour was also spent in the telecommunications room, playing even more Quake II, and we did this for a solid year. But times change, technology changes. Quake 3 came out, but I was much more into Unreal Tournament, which I hold in higher regard. But I'll never forget how big Quake 2 was for me back then. I may not be hardcore into Quake as an IP, but that specific game means something to me. Thank you, Evan Prince, for the guest spot, and if you've never played Quake 2, you should at least give it a few hours and see what it's all about.
Thanks so much for coming on board and telling us about your time with Quake 2, man. And if you're not familiar with Under the Mayo's content, but you're a fan of idSoftware's games, then I'm telling you that you'll love his content, so go check him out. The link is in the description. As for Quake 2, I loved everything about my time with this game. The environment, the enemies, and, of course, the weapons. Speaking of which, I think it's time we break down the different weapons of Quake 2. The first one we need to cover, of course, is the starting weapon called the Blaster. A presumably standard issue sidearm, it is the weakest weapon in the game, although it doesn't require any type of ammunition, which does ensure its use in case you find yourself without any ammo. It's also more useful now in this 2023 enhanced edition of Quake 2 thanks to Night Dive upping its damage output from 10 to 15, which was the right call in my opinion. Even so, you still won't be using it all that much throughout your playthrough due to it being the least effective weapon in the game, and more than enough ammo being available in every area. Speaking of weapons you really aren't likely to be using very often, the shotgun is by no means a useless weapon, as it fires off 12 pellets per shot, dealing 4 points of damage per pellet. Although you are going to want to be right in your opponent's face if you're hoping to deal any amount of damage, it's still a massive step up from the blaster in terms of effectiveness. On harder difficulties, it'll be significantly more integral to your playthrough as you're trying to conserve ammo more, but outside of that, this thing will spend a lot of time unused in your inventory after you get some more powerful alternatives, like the machine gun for example. Not only is this thing an iconic landmark innovation for idSoftware, marking the first appearance of a more standard submachine gun we've seen so far, it's also a reliable fallback weapon for your average enemy encounters. And if you're playing the 2023 remaster, it's twice as useful since Night Dive removed the insane recoil players would have to deal with in the original game. Being a hit scan weapon, it's well suited for most of the game's smaller enemies, but as things pick up in intensity, you may want to find something that packs a little bit more of a punch, like the Super Shotgun. Just like I said in my coverage of Quake 1, 2 barrels means double the gun with double the fun. This monster of a weapon packs an enormous amount of damage if you can get in close on your enemy, and I probably ended up using it more than any of the other weapons in the game just because of how devastating the thing is if you can get up close and personal with the Strogg. It's not suited for every situation because of its wide bullet spread and rate of ammunition expenditure, but man is it fun to use. But don't worry, because of course the machine gun also has an equally, if not more powerful upgrade as well in the form of the chain gun. I mean, let's just be honest here, you already know what's up. Chain guns are nothing new to idSoft games, and this one just happens to spit out up to 28 bullets per second once it's spun up to full speed. Of course, it comes with the caveat of draining out the majority of your ammo before you even have the chance to realize it's happening. I didn't use this one a ton, but was always happy when I had the opportunity to fall back on it and throw out a hailstorm of bullets at crowds of enemies. A totally new addition, however, is the hand grenade. Of course, grenades were available in the first game via the grenade launcher, but this is the first time we can just straight up activate the thing and throw it ourselves, which is cool. I'll be honest though, I barely ever used these things. The only real advantage of the hand grenades are the ability to cook the grenade and the fact that throwing them doesn't tip off your enemy to your presence, so you could potentially score a stealth kill with one if done right. But I mean, Quake II isn't exactly a stealth game, you know? Which is why the grenade launcher ended up being far more useful for me. There's really not much more to say about it beyond that though. It launches grenades, and they explode instantly if they hit your enemy, or rest a few seconds before exploding if they hit the ground first. I mean, it's a grenade launcher, what more do you expect of the thing? Now the rocket launcher on the other hand can be a powerful weapon to employ against more powerful enemies like tanks, brains, or even bosses. Not to mention rocket jumps too, of course. It's a fantastic power weapon to have in your arsenal, but I'll be honest, I really didn't use it half as much as I did the rocket launcher in Quake I. I'm not sure if that's a testament to how good the other weapons are, or just an unaware self-criticism of my own playstyle, but I was rarely pulling this one out this time around. Which is just about the opposite of how I was treating the railgun. Railguns are a staple of early FPS games now, but they weren't quite so common back when this game launched. This beast is the only weapon in the game to use the slug ammo type, and that means exactly what you think it does. This is a genuine slug thrower, and might be my favorite weapon in the game. This thing is a monster. It's also one of the only real downsides I can think of to the Night Dive remaster, since they nerfed the damage from 150 to 125. Actually, first they dropped it to 100 flat, but fan feedback convinced them to bring it back up to 125. This was such a mistake in my opinion, because for pretty much my whole playthrough, I was wondering to myself why the hell my railgun was feeling so weak, and it wasn't until I looked it up that I realized what a mistake had been made. It's not like they did it for multiplayer either, since it's always been weaker there. No, they nerfed it specifically for the single player, which is crazy. Maybe to account for co-op? I'm not sure, but even though it's still one of my favorite weapons in the game, dropping its damage from 150 to 125 was a mistake. I know it might sound like I'm contradicting myself because I said it was awesome and I tended to use it more than other weapons even after the nerf, which implies they were right to nerf it to balance the arsenal and incentivize using other weapons. But I counter that with the fact that I don't care and I want my railguns to be overpowered. Thankfully, the next weapon wasn't nerfed in the remaster. This one is just fun. I mean, it's a rapid-fire laser rifle that spits out gratuitous amounts of damage. It's honestly a favorite of mine. What a great weapon, and its design is super memorable too. It'd probably be wise not to rely too heavily on it though, since it shares an ammo type with the next and final weapon, the BFG 10,000. Yeah, get out of here with that big gun. This is the big freaking gun 10,000. And if you think I'm avoiding saying the word fuck, I'm not. The manual actually calls it the big freaking gun directly. Easily the most powerful weapon in the game, the BFG 10,000 doesn't just damage your enemy when it collides, but rather has 3 separate stages of damage output to enemies. The ball lasers that lash out and burn nearby enemies, the direct impact of the projectile itself, and finally the flash effect that deals out additional damage after the projectile finalizes. And speaking of the projectile, if you hadn't noticed, it's a more fully realized version of the BFG 9000 sprite from Doom 1 and 2. Very cool. And that's all of the weapons you'll be using in Quake 2. Now, before I wrap up with Quake 2, I have to talk a little bit about the music. It's well known that Trent Reznor did not return to score Quake 2 at this point, and in his place, idSoftware brought in the extremely talented Sasha Dikishin, also known professionally as Sonic Mayhem, to take over. And take over he did. Abandoning the more abstract, ambient horror soundscape nature of Quake 1's OST, Quake 2 instead features an intense, fast-paced heavy metal soundtrack laced with layers of orchestral and synthesizer elements. I'd go so far as to call this game's score straight up iconic, honestly. Anyone who's played the game before would instantly recognize and know where any one of these tracks was from if they heard it somewhere, because they're all just that recognizable. Sasha had previously composed his own alternative soundtrack for the original Quake called Methods of Destruction, which is incredible and arguably just as fitting as the Reznor score was in my opinion. I suspect it may have been that alternative fan OST that got him the gig on Quake II's score. One of my favorite things about his new musical direction is the power that each unit seems to carry when the player completes an objective and the music just outright stops. Every time this happened, a wave of atmospheric discomfort washed over me, because now it was just me in a foreign alien base surrounded by the mutilated, augmented bodies of the enemies I just finished slaughtering.
Computer update.
It was super unsettling in the best of ways. My only real criticism for the soundtrack is that there's just not enough of it. Now, Quake II was clearly completed on a crunch. I mean, it dropped like a year and a half after its predecessor, and this fact leads me to believe that perhaps Sonic Mayhem didn't have time to go more in depth, but also this might have been all idSoftware felt they needed from him anyway. Still, there's a lot of areas in the game, and they all just repeat one of the same collection of tracks back at you every time you enter, and it starts to get pretty tired by the end of the game. There were some significant contributions made for the orchestral side of things by Bill Brown that helps make the whole thing feel more climactic than it otherwise would without his involvement. Also, Rob Zombie lended his talent to the intro track specifically, which is a cool bit of trivia. Even so, it's still an excellent soundtrack and easily one of my favorite video game OSTs to jam from time to time.
Quake II is unquestionably one of the single greatest FPS games ever made. I mean, there's a reason other developers were pining to gain access to the engine.
Its technological influence would spread out into other games that would go on to explode into entire franchises, such as Call of Duty and Half-Life, both of which were built on modified versions of the Quake II engine, now retroactively called id Tech 2. Its world was vibrant and immersive, its story simplistic yet shockingly macabre and twisted, its art direction inspired and unique, and its gameplay nothing short of groundbreaking in a way that would continue influencing the direction of the entire industry for decades to come, just as its own predecessors had done before it. And yet, even in spite of all of this, I rarely hear Quake II brought up in any capacity beyond how it pivoted the direction of the franchise. Believe it or not, I'm actually inclined to agree with those criticisms in a lot of ways. I get it. It's super frustrating when you fall in love with a title and its offerings only for the follow-up to completely abandon half of the things that made you love the original to begin with. It sucks, and that frustration shouldn't be brushed aside. I sympathize with this criticism, I do, and I long for a proper follow-up to the original Quake just as much as so many others do. That said, the fact of the matter is that Quake II is an incredible game and deserves to be recognized for everything that it is, rather than written off for everything that it isn't. Recently, though, I have noticed a pretty stark change in the conversation as more people are going back to Quake II again and seeing it for what it is now, as the public consensus seems to be looking more favorably on the old sequel. Something that, funnily enough, was actually predicted by friend of the channel G-Man Lives several years ago.
I think over time people are going to eventually come around and give Quake II the credit it deserves. I mean, there's so much revisionism on the internet these days that it's bound to happen. Just remember though that when that day finally comes and everyone on Twitter is suddenly a fan of this thing, that it was me, poor old G-Man Lives, who was one of the first ones to raise a flag here and fight in the game's defense.
Much like the original game, Quake II also saw 2 mission packs launched shortly after its own release, and once again, each of them was developed by a different individual smaller studio. Unlike the first game, however, Quake II only saw 1 additional expansion release in its later life, so in total it now only boasts 3 expansion packs instead of 4 like Quake I. The Reckoning, Ground Zero, and Call of the Machine. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, although these first 2 expansions take significantly longer to complete than Quake 1's mission packs did, they are far less unique or creative with what they're attempting to do, and part of this is due to the base game's own more constrained narrative and universe. There's only so much a developer can do with a sci-fi setting built around having very little plot or story, and to be upfront with you, I really feel like these first 2 mission packs suffered greatly from not having any of that idSoftware old guard involvement. All of the criticisms I've heard about Quake II, and even defended it from, totally apply to these original 2 expansions. I'm specifying the original 2 because the third one was released over 2 decades later, and none of this applies to that one. I'm getting there. But trying to get through the Reckoning and Ground Zero was brutal, even as a Quake fan, and specifically a Quake II Defender at that. By the time I got to that third and good Quake II expansion, I'd been playing so much Quake over the previous few months that I felt like I was going insane right alongside the characters I was playing as. The old critique that Quake II is just a series of tech-based sci-fi corridors with no atmosphere may not be totally true for that campaign, but it definitely is for these two. The body horror and suffocating atmosphere is basically gone, and the disturbing nature of the enemy we're facing, i.e. the only really interesting thing about this setting, is all but ignored throughout. The level design is good, sometimes anyway, and the campaigns themselves are adequately designed, but they're still pretty rough to get through since they're just smaller mini duplicates of Quake II's base campaign, but worse. That isn't to say that these mission packs have nothing at all to offer though, as there are a few cool and notable things worth pointing out. So let's get right into it and take a look at all 3 of Quake II's expansions, starting with the first one to release, The Reckoning. The Reckoning was developed by Xatrix Entertainment before they later rebranded as Grey Matter Interactive Studios.
Jesse, have you heard of a company called Grey Matter?
Then, that name only lasted a couple of years before they got swallowed up and merged into Treyarch. The game they're probably most notable for is Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but you may have also heard of Redneck Rampage and its sequels, Kingpin Life of Crime, and Call of Duty United Offensive, which is pretty much their entire catalog before they stopped existing, unless you count their first 2 games, Siberia and Siberia 2 Resurrection. Although I do actually like Return to Castle Wolfenstein quite a bit, their reputation as a studio isn't great, and I'm going to be upfront here and tell you now that this expansion does little to help that. It's not the worst thing I've ever played or anything. I mean, it is Quake II after all, so as a game it's fine, but it is probably the worst Quake-related content I've covered so far, and probably one of the worst official Quake campaigns overall. I really did not enjoy my time with this campaign. Now, although I did have some experience with Quake II growing up, I had never played any of these expansions before doing so for this video, so I can't attest to how much the remaster improved The Reckoning over its vanilla release, but based on what I've read online, it's a similar gameplay experience between them. The expansion began development before the base game had even launched, which gave the devs a little more time to work on it, and it finally hit the market on May 27th, 1998. Booting up the campaign, players are treated to a brand new cutscene to lead them into their new adventure, which is where we meet our new player character codenamed Joker.
How about another joke, Murray? Society!
This new character is part of an elite team of Marines being sent in to infiltrate and destroy a base built on the moon that orbits the planet Strogos. But of course, as always, something goes wrong.
I'm hit! Primary power is out. Auxiliaries aren't engaged. We lost the fuel cell. She's dead. I'm going in. I'm going in.
This is the first of the game's 5, previously 4, units, depending on if you're playing the remaster or not. Joker has been cut off from his squad and must now fight his way back to them so he can assist in the assault, and the place he's crashed into has us in a swampland outside of our intended landing zone. This first area, called Wilderness, is actually really cool in my opinion. I don't know why, but I found it to be a pretty good start to the expansion. It feels very open, and the laser fences give off that feeling like we've landed behind enemy lines somewhere we shouldn't be. Also, you'll see we're introduced to a new enemy right away called... This is another example of Strogg fauna being native critters to the planet, though they are no less hostile than anything else we've had to deal with before. In an example of starting really strong, these enemies are super cool, not only in their concept giving us another local life form, but also because occasionally we can see them form together and literally sing some kind of chant. I'm not sure what this is, but I do think it's really cool, and the player can hear this faintly from across the map when they do it. Makes everything feel more ominous. Once we fight our way through the winding pathways of this wilderness area, we come across the entrance into the sewer system. This is where the first signs of the Reckoning's ever-decreasing quality begin to show. Pretty much the whole level here revolves around navigating this maze-like series of different tunnels and pools of water, all of which use the exact same textures for everything. The sewer level itself isn't the worst thing, and it's pretty short once you get the hang of it, but this next level though features all of the same problems but with an even worse level design. It's here that Joker has to find another way out of these tunnels and back out into the wilderness area again to circumvent the laser fences that were cutting us off from accessing the compound. There is some admittedly clever platforming here, but it's overall pretty standard fare for a Quake II level. Once we manage to find an exit, the front door of the next unit isn't far off, and there's just a little bit of traveling to clear out the opening building and make our way out of the wilderness. This expansion does bring back the eagle-eye viewed map scans from the base campaign, which I did appreciate, although they had to change the voice, presumably due to not having access to the original voice actor.
Join with remaining members of Strike Force. Gain entrance to base intelligence facility.
This second unit is one of the larger ones we've seen yet, and our primary objective is to break into the intelligence center and extract the precise location of the enemy Strogg fleet. The outer compound is where the expansion's bad level design starts to kind of set in, but it does get worse from here, make no mistake. Shortly after getting in and killing some Strogg troops, Joker watches the rest of his squad die in front of him and grabs the data CD he'll need off one of their corpses. We also see a drop pod with the call sign Rampage on it as a reference to the studio's other game that I mentioned before, Redneck Rampage. A bit more fighting leads us into the inner compound, where we can find a laboratory section and a warehouse section. This area is actually not that bad. It feels a lot more like the kind of level we could have found in the earlier units of the base game, only quite a bit heavier on the enemies. This mission pack is brutal, and throws a lot more of the tougher enemies at you than the base game ever did this early on. I also like this little puzzle with the laser that blows a hole in the wall. You know what, I'll give this expansion that. It does have a few interesting little scripted bits like this. But man, this one is brutal to play through. I was having to play so carefully and lure Strogg into this laser to take them out for me because I had so little health by this point. So I abused quick saves. Don't judge me, there's a reason Civvy hasn't covered this expansion beyond a few sentences.
One of the things I noticed when playing a little of the first Quake II expansion by Zatrix was that it was considerably more difficult than the main campaign.
Anyway, we're in the core reactor now, and we've got to find a bunch of power cubes, because what would an idSoftware related game be without having to find a dozen keycards, runes, CDs, and other MacGuffins to progress every level? Except when idSoftware does it, it's fun, and when Zatrix does it, it's literally a fight for your very life. We're still in the second unit, less than 25% of the way through, and this one area has 4 tanks and 6 gladiators, not to mention this one new enemy they introduced for this expansion. The Repair Bot, or Fix Bot. It's not clear which one is the accurate name. Although this enemy is introduced in this expansion, it doesn't really matter as it only appears in this area and a bit earlier in the outer compound, and then never again in the whole game or any other expansion. It's kind of like a mini medic that can revive enemies, but I didn't even notice this thing while playing and struggled to find it even when rewatching my footage, so it's not really that notable of an enemy, but props to Zatrix for trying something, I guess. Once we get the power cubes we needed, we can head back out to the inner compound again before gaining access to the warehouse. I'm getting flashbacks to Disillusion of Eternity. The warehouse is a bit less psychotic than the core reactor, as there aren't any tanks, but there are still 6 gladiators scattered around, which will become the bane of my existence by the end of this video. All my homies hate gladiators. It's one of the more generic levels of the expansion, but it does still have some interesting parts, like these moving blocks in this flooded area. The key to the next area is down here though, and once we get that, we can press on through a storage tank that will grant us backdoor access into the intelligence center, which acts as the final area of this unit. One good thing I will say about this level is that it throws us a new toy to play with in the form of the Ion Ripper, an automatic frisbee launcher that both looks and feels like a significantly worse version of the disc launcher gun from the Tribes games. I want to like this weapon because it's cool and pretty powerful, but man, using it just kinda sucked. Maybe it was just me, but it didn't feel impactful and the shots bouncing everywhere was annoying to deal with. Doubly so when it was enemies using it against me. The developers must have thought this thing was fire though, because right after getting it, they throw not one, but two super tanks at us. Or rather, beta class super tanks, which are more powerful and feature power shields for additional durability. The beta class enemies are just stronger versions of the old enemies, and the remaster replaced a lot of the old ones with the beta class anyway, so don't even worry about it. Just know that half the enemies in this expansion are tougher than the ones in the base game. At the end of this level is the computer terminal containing the location of the Strogg strike fleet, so we did manage to get what we came here for after all. With that done and the fleet's location now known, our objective updates and tells us to progress into the industrial zone, which, as you might guess, is the next unit of the game.
Initiate scan. Exiting military compound. Entering industrial region.
This is where all bets are off, and the expansion just spirals into a myriad of attempts to kill you. In-universe, it's interesting because clearly they think we're a threat, but in-game, it's infuriatingly annoying. Within a few seconds of this first area, we're already dealing with another super tank, and also several laser guards, which I'm not going to bother giving an animation, but that are the single most annoying enemy across the whole of Quake II. Imagine a hit-scan enemy that zaps you with a big red line of health remover that not only hit-scans you, but reminds you that you're being hit-scanned the whole time it's doing it. The game is just insulting you at this point. See what I mean? This is the first level of the expansion that really acts as a true hub, as it connects to multiple areas and will be coming in and out of it as we play to beat the unit. We can't enter the refinery until we find the red keycard, and the red keycard is being held in the outer base, which we need the green keycard to access, and the green keycard is here in the industrial facility, but it's being guarded by yet another super tank. And the best weapon I have is this stupid disc gun, but hidden in this courtyard is another new weapon called the Phalanx Particle Cannon. I'd say it's the best new thing this expansion has to offer, as it's basically just a double-barreled slug thrower, which is cool. However, I still didn't use it very much because it's less effective than the rocket launcher and it eats through my slug ammo, which I'd much rather spend on my railgun. Well, when I finally find one, that is. At least it only uses one bullet instead of two, and in the remaster it deals double damage to energy shields, which is super useful since so many enemies have those now. With the key we needed, we're able to make our way into the outer base. I actually sat on the screen for nearly a full minute after this happened out of sheer frustration. From a visual design standpoint, this level looks really cool. The big city in the distance, the flooded area we have to dive into, but don't get used to it because we'll be buried in warehouse corridors soon enough. As I was writing this, I nearly got confused seeing this area is called the Outer Base, but the last unit has an area called the Outer Compound. I found myself missing the interesting level names of the original Quake and its expansions. Even the base Quake II campaign had some cool level names, but here in The Reckoning, we're soon to be treated to even more incredible area names such as Lower Hangars, The Hangars, Cargo Bay. You'll see as we go, they're descriptive, but they're certainly not creative. Also, I hate the layout of the outer base. It makes no sense and it's not fun to play through. Typically, I can overlook one or the other separately, but when a level is both at the same time, it's just painful. If you can grit your teeth through this area, you'll soon find yourself entering the refinery. This one is better, and I had more fun playing through it. There's some pretty cool things about this area too, and the layout is also much better. There's a lot of toxic slime, which I'm pretty sure is called Stroyant, and the fuel production facility for that Strogg fleet we're planning to destroy is also here, which we'll need to single out for our boys to hit with an airstrike. Problem is, the airstrike marker we need got snagged by a group of Geks, and taken back to the industrial facility we just came from. So we have to backtrack a bit, only to find out that they ran straight through the facility into the wilderness outside of the industrial complex altogether, called the Badlands. But in order to get there, we have to first gain access to and enter the water treatment plant. This is a relatively small area, all things considered, but it does have a major focus on large open rooms with a lot of space to move around, and just enough verticality to maintain a solid flow throughout. It's a pretty quick in and out map, but not bad at all. Its main purpose is to act as an in-between for taking us from the industrial facility into the Badlands. This is one area I liked a lot. We enter through this old rusted water treatment area which opens up into the wilderness of the planet Strogos. There's really only a few levels across the Quake II catalog that give the natural landscape of Strogos a lot of focus, so I think that's one thing this expansion does really well, and I've got to give it credit for that. We're taken through a variety of winding canyons and dark caves, all crawling with the local predator gex and barracuda fish. It's also well designed enough that the flow feels natural and easy to play. It's actually one of the best levels in the game in terms of immersion. I have no idea what the intended story was behind the weird chant thing that these creatures do when they're hitting this possession pose either. That question does kind of get answered retroactively way later by other developers in another expansion, but I'm getting to that. With the airstrike marker in hand, we can push through the Badlands straight back into the refinery thanks to an alternative exit in the level, and then drop our airstrike marker to take out the Strogg fleet's source of fuel production.
Viper Squadron to Recon 4, commencing delivery. Clear the area. Repeat, clear the area.
Incoming airstrike.
Looks like this gas station just went out of business.
Exiting industrial region. Entering Starlight Spaceport. Infiltrate enemy transport and proceed to Moon Base.
This is the worst unit of the entire expansion. The spaceport. Our goal here is to fight through said spaceport, locate the Strogg freighter, and ride it to the Strogos moon to destroy the target fleet. We enter the level through the lower hangars, where we are immediately bombarded by Strogg. This map is just saturated in them. We're talking 93 different enemies stuffed into this one area. I have to wonder how this map even ran on a Pentium 2 desktop back in 1998. Like, what was the frame rate like? If this level ran even smooth-ish, then it's a testament to Carmack's id Tech 2 engine here. It's also just visually the most uninteresting area of the game too, so not only is it a series of stuffy corridors jam-packed with enemies, but it also all looks the same. I don't like being overly negative in these videos, but you're not giving me much to work with here, Xatrix, or Gray Matter Studios, or whatever. The next level isn't much better either, don't be fooled by the inspired name. I honestly don't think this level is as bad as the one before it. The layout is a little bit less frustrating, and the conveyor belts moving crates around the map adds an interesting visual dynamic that helps make it easier to keep track of where you are and prevent everything from looking so samey. It's also got some good verticality, which is one of the biggest strengths of the Quake games in my opinion. You gotta be doubling down on your verticality to get the most out of your Quake maps. The entrance to the freighter is blocked off by a security force field, so in order to access it, we'll have to stow away in a storage crate to try and pass ourselves off as cargo, which works actually. Interestingly enough, the Strogg freighter was the third part of Unit 4 in the original 1998 expansion's release. Night Dive split it into its own unit for the 2023 remaster, making it the only singular level of Unit 5 which shares its name. I'm not sure what the exact reason for their doing this was, but I guess thematically it does kind of make sense, as this level is sort of its own thing anyway. It's actually a decent level too. The reduced gravity is fun to play with, although we rarely get a chance to use it in a meaningful way, but it's got a nice flow to it overall. And since it's not too big, it's easier to play through without feeling completely exhausted. The end of the level sees us taking on 2 tanks and a tank commander, which did give me some trouble though. I assume the only reason they didn't stuff 4 super tanks in there is because they wouldn't fit. Once we're able to assassinate the bridge crew and stop the automatic self-destruct sequence, we can kick back and ride this thing straight to the Strogos moon.
Initiate scan. Exiting Starlight Spaceport. Entering Moon Base.
It's down to the wire now, and the devs want you to know it, so they spawn a tank commander in front of you at the start of the level, along with half a dozen hit-scan laser enemies. Thanks, Xatrix! It makes sense that we would exit into the cargo bay of the moon base, so I understand this decision, but the walls of various cargo crates stacked up literally everywhere makes this mission look visually nearly identical to the spaceport areas. It's almost headache-inducing how much of this game's latter half is just rusty, dark orange warehouse rooms stacked full of cargo crates. Unless you are super familiar with this expansion, then seeing multiple quick clips of these crate rooms from across different levels would leave you thinking they're all the same area. I'm pretty sure this one expansion nearly drove me into a Lovecraftian madness of losing my grip on reality.
It all looks the same!
After we push forward quite a ways, we do finally see some more open areas, with the window showing us the Stragos moon exterior, which that part is super cool. I like that. They should have done more of that. The command center is the final level of the game, and an enormous sigh of relief to me as it's laid out well and there's some much needed variety like these Strogos moon caves, which although we didn't see in the base campaign, did show up in the Quake II N64 version, so there's almost some kind of continuity there. I think that's really cool. I'll talk about that later. The low gravity moon caves are fun, and saving them for this last level was a good idea because it kind of feels like payoff. Like we're finally seeing something new here at the end of the line. Although they did that thing where the ground is slippery like old ice levels used to do in games, which is super annoying to deal with. The moon base's main reactor is housed here in the command center, so all we have to do is find the reactor, shut it down, and let the whole place self-destruct itself into oblivion along with the Strogg Counter-Strike fleet. So we walk around, push some switches, and open the core up to a little sabotage. Easy enough, we're almost done. Oh wow, so they've got another Macron here guarding the moon base, and believe it or not, I'm pretty sure he's way harder to kill than the base game Macron, but I looked it up and can't prove it, so maybe it just felt that way. It's not really explained how this thing is here either, since Bitterman killed the Strogg leader, but the common consensus from what I can tell is that there's several warlord leaders across their forces, and this is just one of them. Okay, cool. Well, that's done. Let's get the hell out of here. One final push sees us running back through the cargo bay as the whole base falls apart in on itself, and we try to find a way to escape before we wind up space dust like the rest of this place is about to be. The fact that they bothered to program in all of this falling debris and whatnot was kind of an extra mile that I appreciate. Luckily, there was a ship in the base's hangar waiting for us.
Come on, boy, move it! Pressurizing, -2. Outer hatch sealed. We're on our way, sir. Picking up some heavy chop. I see it. Shockwave. Hang on. That's it. We're clear. What the hell happened down there, sir? It's over. For now.
So the Marine known as Joker landed on Strogos, infiltrated an industrial facility, fought his way onto an enemy freighter, stormed a moon base, killed a Strogg warlord, and then destroyed said moon base. Not a bad ending. The expansion itself, however, I mean, I've said it enough that I think you get the gist. It's rough. It's not horrible. Like, by way of being Quake 2, obviously it's going to be a fun game. And there was clearly a lot of effort put into this thing. I don't think the quality of the Reckoning is due to laziness or low effort. It's just some bad level design decisions and aggressive enemy placement decisions that cause the whole thing to feel so frustrating to deal with. It's a challenging expansion. Much more challenging than the base game was, that much is for sure. I also think it's probably the worst of the available Quake II campaigns, even counting the ports. The Reckoning isn't poorly made, it's just not very fun, and that's a problem. It also fails to offer or deliver anything new to players that you can't get in the base campaign besides 2 new weapons, a trap item, and some new enemies, only one of which is interesting. Even the Quake I expansions tried to be daring and different, but this is really just more of the same. Those even introduced brand new soundtracks that totally changed the vibe of the game, but this one straight up reuses half the Sonic Mayhem score for every map, which, while I love that score, starts to get old after a while. Ground Zero does this too, only bringing in a few new tracks from Sonic Mayhem and then reusing several from the original game. I guess that's not the worst way to go about it though, and the new Sonic Mayhem tracks are great, but I just wish that they had both gotten completely new original scores for their entirety. If you love Quake 2 and you can't get enough of its gameplay, world, and aesthetic, then there might be something here for you. I'd probably exhaust all of the other offerings first though over this one. I didn't hate The Reckoning, but I really doubt I'll ever play it again, and if I do, then it won't be for fun. Ground Zero, much like The Reckoning, was mostly maligned by the majority of the Quake fans on release, but unlike The Reckoning, I actually kind of liked this one. Or at the very least, I think I see what it was going for, more so than The Reckoning. It's worth mentioning that I played the remastered version for this video, and I've never played this expansion in its original form, which was likely a major reason why I kind of liked it, because after doing some reading, the vanilla version of this campaign was a nightmare. It was also developed by Rogue Entertainment, a studio name you might recognize from my coverage of the Quake I expansion, since they developed Dissolution of Eternity, which was another expansion I kind of liked in spite of its negative reputation. Ground Zero is not as good as Dissolution of Eternity. Shockingly, Ground Zero also has the least amount of plot of any of the Quake II campaigns. I say shockingly because Rogue Entertainment's previous expansion was the most plot-heavy of the Quake I campaigns, and their game before that, Strife, was practically an RPG and one of the single story heaviest boomer shooters I can think of. We open on another really fun cinematic of an Earth ship sending out what looks to be several dozen more single marine dropships towards Strogos. A bunch of them are checking in to ensure all systems are go, and we see the call sign of our new protagonist, Stepchild. Suddenly, a series of Strogg starfighters come flying up from the surface and start firing off shots and taking out several of our allied ships. The capital ship is unable to leave, along with the rest of the human fleet due to a gravity well activating and trapping them in the planet's pull. It's up to us to destroy that gravity well.
I'm going in.
Jumping out of the pod, we watch it sink into the lava as the ground around us shakes. This is the lower mines, and it's loaded with explosive red crystals and plenty of angry Strogg to contend with. Our job is to reach the tectonic stabilizer and destroy it before pressing on towards the gravity well we need to shut down. The unit itself is fine overall, I think, and its levels do feel a bit better layout-wise than most of the Reckoning, but I was a little bit disappointed to see how much less creative this expansion was than Rogue's last one for the original game. Ground Zero suffers from the same atmosphere issue we saw in the Reckoning of it looking exactly like the base campaign and really not offering anything new or exciting enough to justify its own existence. I do like that we're pressing buttons and moving these crystals around so soon after starting our first mission. It's cool and feels interactive, but it's just not enough. The entrance to the second unit is here, so we'll need to come back later, but for now we press on into the Thalite mines. It's got great lighting, decent layout, and good design, but it's really just somehow not much to experience. Without the body horror nature of the original campaign being pushed to the forefront, it all quickly becomes the kind of repeated instances of a military sci-fi tech base that the main game was criticized of being. We won't spend too much time down here in the Thalite mines though, since we're only down here to gain access to the aforementioned tectonic stabilizer. Once we're in the area with that, we finally get something kind of interesting to do. This level is better. I'd say it's the best map of the unit actually. First off, we grab a new weapon called an ETF rifle. And it's pretty good actually. I liked it way more than any of the new weapons in the Reckoning. In the original release, this weapon used the nail gun firing sound from Quake I assume due to time constraints, but Night Dive ended up giving it a more unique sound in this 2023 remaster. It's a great gun with its own specific ammo type called fletchets, so it's really good to lean on since it doesn't eat up ammo for the other weapons. Oh yeah, and we're also introduced to a new enemy type in this map too. This enemy is another reason why I liked Ground Zero more than the Reckoning, because it's cooler to fight and more interesting than that expansion's new Strogg types. The Stalker is an arachnid-like horror that can climb on walls and ceilings, making it easy for them to sneak up on you without your knowing, and they can also fire off green projectiles as well. Throwing these guys into an environment makes it instantly more tense, I'll tell you that much. Our job here is to destroy an insane number of these power circuits we see littered around the area. No, seriously, there's so many of them, and once we do this, we can feel the ground shaking as the tectonic stabilizer starts to give way. There's also access to a hidden map in this unit too, busting through a pipe and taking us down into mine engineering where we have to fight through a section of the building that's collapsing, and it's obviously very well scripted. I like this one. It's a great little reward for people who are willing to scan maps more diligently for secrets. Also, this is where we get another of the expansion's new weapons, the Chain Fist. It sucks. I lament that it does, but it does. I'd have loved to use this thing more, but it's just not very powerful, and you take too much damage trying to use it. Super cool design, though. The lava actually does rise and chase the player as you play through the map, too, which adds a fun sense of urgency that I liked. With the tectonic stabilizer destroyed and the unit cleared, we move on to the next one.
Personnel located. Tectonic stabilizer destroyed. Now exiting. Ore mine.
You'll never guess what kind of locations we're in for here in Unit 2. Unless you guessed more warehouses, of course. I can't. Everything looks the same.
And I think I'm starting to lose it. I'm on Trevis still, I think.
Eastern Warehouse is our goal to find the red keycard and fight our way to the waterfront storage area. There's 2 new enemy types introduced here, too. I cannot stand this enemy. We're doubling down on the Greek myth references here too, as this variant of the Icarus enemy type are called Daedalus, who was the father of Icarus and architected the labyrinth that contained the Minotaur. It was Daedalus who constructed the wings that he and Icarus used to escape that very same labyrinth that he designed after King Minos imprisoned him and his son there. Daedalus constructed those wings using bird feathers, thread, and beeswax to allow them to flap their arms and fly away. Daedalus warned his son Icarus not to fly too close to the burning star in the sky lest the heat melt the beeswax that held their wings together. And his son, ignoring his father's instruction, soared upward towards the sun, his wings melted, and he fell into the ocean and drowned. Which I'm using as a metaphor to explain how Rogue Entertainment tried to make this expansion more challenging to account for how good Quake II players had gotten at the game and ended up making it incredibly annoying. This enemy type is just a big, green, annoying flying bullet sponge. That's it. The other enemy type introduced in this level is the turret. I'm not going to talk about the turret just yet, but keep it in mind. I'm coming back to it. Up next is waterfront storage. It's warehouses. Rogue, what happened, guys? Your Quake 1 expansion was colorful and creative. Strife was like 10 years ahead of its time with what it attempted. What occurred at that studio to make them phone this all in so hard? It's all just warehouses. The logistics complex spices things up a little bit. So he dies on arrival from the crash, and our computer voice updates to tell us to finish carrying out that dead Marine's mission, as if we didn't have enough going on already. There's a tank commander down here, and we're going to need to pick his brain before we can go any further. And I mean that literally. So with his head chopped off, we make our way in there and grab it off the ground to carry it with us. We're gonna need it later. The final map of Unit 2, Tactical Command, is where we'll get the data disk we need before heading back to the logistic complex, reprogram the disk, align the satellites, come back to Tactical Command, and feed the corrupted data disk to disrupt the Strog's ground-to-air communications network.
Now exiting. Communication facility. Locate Strog research hangar. Securing threat. Strog experimental fighter.
So, I thought Unit 2 was okay, but Unit 3... The Strog are working on an experimental new fighter to use against humanity, and we need to find it before it can be launched, which means fighting our way through the research hangars. There's a few interesting surprises waiting for us here too, like if you didn't find the Chain Fist in the secret earlier, this is where you'd normally get it. Too bad it sucks and is nearly unusable because it's a really cool weapon. This isn't really a melee kind of game though. Every enemy has projectile weapons and half of them are hit scans, so this doesn't work. One thing I have to give the devs credit for is that they did come up with a lot of great scripted sequences across these maps. I particularly liked this bit where you reprogram an anti-air gun to blast open the roof and allow our allied forces to drop an airstrike on it, which in turn grants us alternative access into the waste processing area. Across most of idSoftware's older catalog, you'll find tastefully implemented elements of puzzle solving and exploration to accomplish goals. In this map, and honestly kind of scattered across this unit in general, there's so much you need to do in order to progress. Flipping switches, turning valves, activating reactors. I mean, I do appreciate the interactivity of these levels beyond just shooting anything that moves and finding an exit, but you may have gone too far when I'm spending more time wandering around trying to figure out what to do than I am shooting at things in my Quake shooter game. So that leads us into waste disposal, which this is all looking so similar. Man, I'm starting to struggle to tell the difference between areas now. This is... Okay, so the waste disposal area is what leads to the maintenance hangar, which is where we need to go so we can find and steal that experimental Strogg starfighter.
And that... It's also boxy and round.
And I always find something wrong. You've been putting up with my shit just way too long. I'm so gifted at finding what I don't like the most. And so I think it's time for us to have a toast. Let's have a toast for the douchebags. Let's have a toast for the assholes.
My pain is constant and sharp, and I do not hope for a better world for anyone. In fact, I want my pain to be inflicted on others. I want no one to escape.
Unit 4 is thankfully only 2 areas, and our goal here is to acquire the parts we'll need in order to create an antimatter bomb. Remember, the goal of this expansion is to infiltrate and destroy the Strogg gravity well, currently keeping our Earth fleet from moving, so we'll need 2 things in order to achieve this goal: an antimatter core and a containment pod. The good news is that we're pretty much through the worst of it now. The rest of Ground Zero is actually really good. Well, mostly really good. Rogue locked in to finish this off. Oh yeah, the turrets. These things are probably the single biggest criticism most people had of this expansion when it dropped. And that's for a reason. I can totally see why, because even in the 2023 remaster, which slightly nerfed them, these things are still completely insufferable. There's far more of these turrets across the Ground Zero campaign than any other enemy type except for like 1. Ground Zero Nightmare veterans probably still have PTSD-style flashbacks of these things. Anyway, back to the munitions plant. It's a decent enough area, although still kinda warehousey. It plays well, smooth layout, all around not bad. The Ammo Depot, on the other hand, offers up one of the single most unique aspects of the entirety of Quake II, the Strogg Biomaintenance Chamber. This thing basically equips you as the player with a Strogg disguise, allowing you to appear as one of them and walk around the level without being engaged by enemy forces. See, this is one of those little things that makes this expansion better than the Reckoning, and also gives the player a break from the monotony of the base gameplay loop. You can use this mechanic as much as you like in this area, but the second you engage with the enemy or leave the area, the disguise will disappear. It's a neat little addition to the game, and I remembered this one thing more than like 75% of the rest of the expansion when I was done with it. Once we've acquired the antimatter core and inserted it into the container, now all we have to do is head for the gravity well via that gondola and deliver the payload. This is what I was looking for. This is the unique, interesting design one would expect of an expansion being handled by Rogue Entertainment. This is cool. So we head for the final unit of the game, Widow's Lair.
Locate gravity generator. Use antimatter bomb to destroy gravity well. Return to research hangar. Use experimental fighter for escape. End transmission.
This is the shortest unit of the game, containing only 1 area to fight through. The first thing we find is a drop pod lodged into the side of the wall as we hear a Marine banging to be let out.
Let me out.
Or sap. Entering into the gravity well, we enter the boss battle arena to meet our final foe. One-upping the first expansion, this one actually features an all-original boss character for players to fight via the Black Widow. It's not clear what her role is within the Strogg ranks lore-wise, but she's easily the strongest enemy type of any Quake II entry with the most health and highest damage. She can spawn infinite stalkers to the battlefield to try and kill the player, and is armed with a very powerful blaster and a railgun. That's not enough for you though. Once you destroy her, she teleports her upper body away and her lower half onto a new body that comes lumbering out in the form of a giant mechanical spider. This is her second form and is in every way more powerful than her first. We also get this weird mural of her built into the entrance of the gravity well, which I can't show on YouTube, but is interesting to note. There probably should have been more of these throughout the expansion to build up the final boss, to be honest. I was caught off guard by her presence just because I was expecting another Macron fight, but it was a pleasant surprise. Anyway, there's the gravity well. The visual design of this final level is incredible, by the way. Where was this literally anywhere else in the rest of the expansion? We should have had like multiple levels with this aesthetic leading into the ending rather than relegating all of it to the last 4 minutes of the entire experience. What do you mean they can make super visually interesting areas and just opted to give us 2 hours of warehouses?
This is Private Stepchild calling the Demos. Stepchild calling the Demos. I've planted the charges on the gravity well generator. Inform all remaining ground troops to evacuate the area.
Copy that, Stepchild. Now get out of there.
Roger. Stepchild out.
Security breach detected. You are not clear for takeoff.
Shit, I'm not going to make it. Stepchild Demos, did it work?
Hell yes, it worked, Private. We're reporting total destruction of primary target and huge secondary chain reaction explosions all across the planet's surface. Nothing's living on that rock.
What about the others?
There aren't that many left to retrieve, Stepchild. You're one of the lucky few that made it out of that inferno in one piece.
Let's get the hell out of here.
When Ground Zero first released, it was received more negatively than The Reckoning, but this was mostly due to the increased difficulty of the turrets just pissing people off, and also, I would wager, the fatigue of playing so much Quake II so close together with so little distinguishing elements between the base game and its expansions. I was even feeling that myself, like I could tell I was being harder on these expansions just because I was getting tired of playing so much Quake II with so little variety. Overall, I liked Ground Zero slightly more than The Reckoning because it did feature a few interesting scripted sequences and its own original boss enemy, which helps it stand out far more overall. It's just really hard to recommend it to anyone who's not already a really big fan of Quake's gameplay and aesthetic though, because there isn't very much it offers that you couldn't find a better version of in the vanilla campaign beyond the boss, a couple of enemies, and a couple of interesting weapons. This was the end of official Quake II content for over 2 decades, but of course, along with the new 2023 remaster of Quake II, came a brand new campaign called For Night Dive's Quake II Remaster, they invited Machine Games to come on board and develop a brand new campaign to launch alongside it, just like they'd done with Quake I's Dimension of the Machine. Though this time, the new campaign was far more ambitious, more climactic, and sought to provide some long-needed closure to the hearts of Quake fans everywhere in an unexpected way. Keeping in the same theme as their first expansion, this one is named Call of the Machine and features 7 different playable Marines, 1 per new operation. Gone is the previous Quake II mission structure of levels being contained within a series of sequential units. Now, the units have been replaced with 6 separate operations, which can be played in any order the player desires. Though I looked up the best order to play through them and progressed in that fashion. Call of the Machine brings back the hub area concept with an explorable ship or space station containing a series of different screens, each for this specific Marine to monitor the individual operations from. Fittingly, this Marine is codenamed the Machine. On this space station, referred to in-game as the Strog Gateway, we can see the planet Strogos in the distance, enveloped by the vast ocean of space. That portal is our only entrance to the location of the Strog Maker. How does the Machine know about the Strog Maker? How did he know about this portal? Great questions. Each operation transfers our perspective into the eyes of a different Marine who we inhabit for the duration of that operation and opens with us descending in our drop pod. This is really cool, and already we're getting something totally unique to this expansion that helps it stand out. Each operation opens with this, and I love it. Super immersive. This opening area, called the Outer Complex, is already miles above anything we saw in the last 2 expansions too, although we need to be fair and keep in mind that this expansion was developed 2 decades later with the benefit of way more advanced hardware, so it damn well should be. We've got a plethora of dynamic moving objects across the map, great verticality across several open areas to navigate, and more than a few enemies to deal with. Seriously, I'm pretty sure this one level alone is more interesting and recognizable than anything available in the other expansions, and possibly even the base game, and it only gets better from here. Moving a bit forward, we enter into the Security Annex, which is really just more of the same, but with quite a bit more interior segments than the prior level. The most significant thing of note is actually how it introduces named mini-bosses, which are a prominent thing across this expansion. Essentially, they're just larger versions of previously encountered enemies, but little things like this actually make such an enormous difference in the feeling of the different areas. There's also physically upsized and downsized versions of regular enemies as well.
I don't know what the hell you feeding him, but he is too damn big!
But it hits different when they have names. The final level of this operation, though, is where it really started to sink in exactly what I was dealing with here. This expansion throws enemy NPCs at you unlike anything else you will have faced in a Quake game up until this point, and I gotta respect its game here. I had to legitimately step back and lock in so I could handle how much harder these levels were than the previous ones. Like, they're not messing around. The progression of these areas is completely brilliant, by the way. The fact that we touch down outside of this facility and slowly make our way deeper into its core, only to find ourselves climbing this tower to insert a data disk and realign a satellite dish, this is Quake II at its absolute best. The fog and fat of the previous two expansions have been removed, and the best features refined into the very best I think Quake II has ever felt. Embodying a new Marine codenamed Positivity, we drop into the heart of a Strogg base with orders to infiltrate the nearby junkyard and find the data disk we need. Most of these operations revolve around finding, reprogramming, and using different data disks. That's fine, it's not like Quake II levels have ever been particularly plot heavy anyway. Something I'll say about this operation, though, is that I did find it to be one of the more forgettable ones. Still top-notch premium quality on offer, and if anything, it may be more forgettable due just to how unique some of the other operations are, but it did blend together a bit more than some of the others for me. Although I did like this part where we have to shoot down these crates and hop over them. Just some great game design on display here. The scale is also really big here too, like this massive processing plant area where we have to disengage this machine in order to acquire a power cube and all of the lights shut down. It's so good. Moving on to the next area, by dropping down this vertical pipe tunnel, we find ourselves in heavy water. Our goal here is to find and disable the reactor core so we can get these shields shut down, and right away we find ourselves face to face with the Gex from the Reckoning. And not only that, but the Stalkers from Ground Zero are here too. See, that's one area where Machine Games improved on this expansion over their Quake I release, Dimension of the Machine, because Call of the Machine incorporates several elements from Quake II's other expansions, like the enemies and weapons. It really helps give it this feeling that this is the culmination of everything you've been working towards, and as though the Strogg is throwing everything they've got at you now. Even though you play as 10 separate Marines across Quake II and these 3 expansions, and that's not even counting the N64 or PS1 ports, it's still you as the player feeling that escalation. In case you hadn't guessed, the reason this area is called heavy water is because you'll be doing a good amount of swimming in order to progress. Call of the Machine does a fantastic job with how it incorporates backtracking between these areas too. Each operation actually feels like a fleshed out series of structures that you'll need to explore and learn as you travel back and forth between areas. Also, secret levels make a comeback here too, with the aptly named McGee Station. Much like Sandy's room from the Quake I expansion, Dimension of the Machine, McGee Station is also named after one of the OG developers of Quake II, American McGee. And it does kind of feel like an American McGee level in some ways too. It's very dark and takes you through a series of tunnels where you need to eradicate the Strogg enemies posted up throughout. It's a fairly easy secret level to find as well, arguably the easiest of the secret levels to locate, honestly. With the trial of McGee Station completed, we're taken back to the previous area to fight our way into the junkyard. Easily one of the more memorable levels of this expansion for me, not only because it looks really unique compared to anything else we've seen in Quake II before, but also because it kind of reminds me of Ord Mantell from Shadows of the Empire. Oh yeah, and there's a mini-boss fight here against a garbage carrier too. I have no idea what inspired these inclusions in every operation, but they're one of the coolest additions in my opinion. This rules. To wrap up this mission, we find the data disk in the junkyard control room, grab that, make our way around the cliffs and back to the uplink tower right by our pod where we dropped in so we can get this data uploaded, but not before we're attacked by yet another mini-boss. You can find multiple of these boss battles in some of these operations, which is also super cool. But we've got places to be, so... This one might be a contender for my favorite operation of the whole expansion. Playing as a Marine codenamed Sir Gubble, which apparently translates in Swedish to mean grumpy old man, we drop into some kind of mine on Strogos where we'll be fighting our way deeper into the mine. Unlike a lot of other operations in Call of the Machine, this one doesn't feature backtracking between areas, instead offering up a linear progression from start to finish. I really like the layout of this first area too. For some reason it feels very good to play and explore, which is a good thing because this is where the portal to another secret level is located. This is another secret level very similar to McGee's Station, where it's kind of just a trial arena for the player to overcome, but it's even more simplistic than that one was. Also like that level, this one was named after another industry veteran developer, though rather than an idSoft old guard, this one is referencing Dario and Milo Casali, most known for their work on the Doom expansions TNT Evolution and the Platonia experiment. The devs over at Machine Games are clearly paying this era of gaming as much respect as they can, and it shows. Completing this trial takes us back into the previous level where we take an elevator down into the next area. This facility is actually called Megacorps 4, which is an insane thing to name your building, but all too fitting for a strong-owned structure in Quake 2. I mean, just look at the massive symbol for war to show how much of their enemy's blood they're harvesting. Dark stuff. One really interesting fact about this level is that it is continuously descending, which is honestly a theme of the whole operation. We move down into these shaft tunnels where we can't see anything, loaded with mutants, stuck with nothing but our flashlight the whole time while we're completely overrun by these things. We just keep on descending further and further down until we eventually find a lone Marine who's lost his mind hiding down here in this hallway that seems overrun with some kind of solidified flesh. He managed to get the blue key this far, but we'll have to take it from here, which leads us to the next area. This level is a boss arena where we'll be facing down against a boss called the Gate Warden. This area is relegated strictly to this boss battle, but don't be fooled as this is not the end of the expansion. These fights go so hard too, I can't even elaborate it to you, and during this fight we see several of our fellow Marines in these crusher pods being harvested to fuel this massive portal generator. Once we finish off our battle against the Gate Warden, it's down the portal we go. Okay, so that was weird. Anyway, we're on Earth's moon now in a base called the Luna Outpost, and it's been totally overrun by Strogg forces. In what is easily one of my favorite levels of the expansion, we get to fight our way through this low-gravity moon base, and it's the first time in Quake II that things have looked so distinctly different, visually speaking. I'm like 12 to 15 hours into Quake II at this point, and this is one of the first levels I encountered that wasn't some kind of Strogg-flavored tech base or alien canyon. I'm not really sure where they got the assets for this level either, which makes me wonder if they had someone create all of these specifically for this level. Like, this looks original. Once more, we're seeing that theme of descent as we make our way deeper and deeper into the base. There's something in the moon's core currently jamming the signal we need to send whatever data is on this disk. So we're gonna have to go down there, find whatever it is, and do what we do best. Oh, so there's a whole Macron down here. You might think this is a whole boss battle, but it's not. He's a mini-boss. The real boss battle of this operation comes after we push a little bit deeper into the moon's core and face off against the children of the Macron, which are just smaller Macrons, but there's two of them and they're also really dangerous. Once we eliminate the multi-Macron threat within the moon's core, the Strogg jammers are disabled and the data we had attempted to transmit is sent through. And I presume our Marine Sir Gubble dies here. Unlike the last operation, this one kinda takes things down a notch. That's not to say it's not a great unit or anything, because it definitely is, but it's just a little bit less insane than the previous set of levels. It's far more contained and concise, spanning across 3 main areas with 1 secret level. This first area is just so cool too. I really like this big arena-like courtyard area and how we could see the massive ringed planet in the distance. This is great. I think it might be one of the best designed layouts for an outdoor area in Quake that we've ever seen. The door into the base is locked, so our new Marine codenamed Erickson opens this mechanical door so we can drop down into the sewers and swim in that way. Classic. And you know we're cooking when the level name is the Strogg Flesh Labs too. This area features a very special enemy type that doesn't appear anywhere else in any other expansion. This one is special, and was created as an exclusive enemy type for the Quake II PlayStation port back in 1999. A non-canonical alternative iteration of Quake II where it remained until being featured here in this mission, finally. This is a super cool inclusion, and I'm so glad they threw this guy in here. Even if it is only for this singular appearance, it still ended up being one of the more memorable parts of this operation for me. They didn't give him any visual upgrades or anything like they did with the other enemies in Quake II, but if I'm being real with you, it's hardly noticeable, and he fits right in no problem. I got a little annoyed after this though, because the rest of this level just bleeds into the Quake II warehouse aesthetic, and although it's not this expansion's fault, I was so sick of crate carriers and warehouses by this point for obvious reasons, so I found myself just trying to get through the rest of this area as fast as I could. Of course, there's a secret level here too via a portal you can find near the start, and it's interesting in what it tries to do. Another trial map placing you in a long lava river where you have to jump across a series of moving platforms while avoiding fire and taking out enemies. That leads you through a series of industrial-looking halls, and it's honestly not bad. We get to take out the largest supply of hostile Strogg trash cans I've ever seen, and then we wrap it up and head back to the Strogg Flesh Labs. The real fun begins in the last level though, where the data disk we need is being kept safe, and the entrance to that area is back in the courtyard, which we can't get back to since we swam here through a sewer tunnel and the door back is locked, so we'll need to find another way. Yeah, that works. Throwing on a quad damage and deconstructing a few dozen Strogg leads us to the elevator and down into the mainframe. I would definitely call this the best area of the operation and one of the most memorable levels in the expansion in total. First off, it's the only area that uses the turrets from Ground Zero, and to phenomenal effect as well. Dodging these blue lasers is another really memorable moment for me. I found this to be really cool. We also have the chance to climb up this massive tree-like machine, which I believe is the mainframe in question, that we then enter and navigate the inside of until we're able to destroy it, thereby disabling all of the lasers across the facility. It's not over yet though. Right after grabbing the data disk, we need to come face to face with another boss battle, this time in the form of the System Administrator. Giving them these unique boss names really amplifies this experience by giving it a kind of Souls-like world-building quality. Now, after beating the System Administrator, it can be easy to rush over and upload the data and complete the mission, but if you do a little exploring, you'll also discover a hidden mini-boss within the halls of the mainframe. And I do mean mini. Unlike the previous drops we've seen so far, this one shows a very different landscape view from our pod. We're on Earth now. As a Marine codenamed Brickslayer, we enter into what I believe is an old sewer station, but something is really different about this level. There's no Sonic Mayhem music here, it's just a humming ambience. This is a track pulled from the Quake II 64 port soundtrack composed by Aubrey Hodges, which is super fitting for these levels beyond what I can describe. Masterful incorporation of every artifact of Quake II's DNA in a way that feels organic, yet very different than anything we've seen before. This isn't the only operation that uses tracks from Quake II 64, but I wanted to point it out here because it fits so well. Just complete bliss on the part of Machine Games here. Now, a lot of these operations feature backtracking through different areas, but this specific one takes that to another level. These areas are so connected and require so much backtracking that it genuinely feels like you're just playing across one massive area with a few loading screens. For example, on this level, one of the first things we see is the engine of a Strogg ship that's landed on top of this structure. Getting on board that ship is our biggest priority right now, and it's kind of an ever-present aspect that we can see in every level here. It's also drilling down into the surface, which blocks off a bunch of paths that we'll need to access later once we stop those drills and retract them back into the ship. It's really cool to be playing Quake 2 on Earth like this, and I love this railway tunnel as it reinforces that feeling of being on our own home turf.
Let me out.
They've been tearing through our boys here like carry-on, and we're running out of time. The way these areas constantly weave back and forth between one another is pretty much a masterclass of level design. Sometimes you're traveling underneath it all through these tunnels, and other times you're jumping above it via little platforming sections. If you're really trying to complete everything and find the secrets, this one will take you longer than most of the others for sure. The lack of metal music mixed with the chanting of the various gecs across the buildings creates a sinister kind of ambient atmosphere that we haven't seen in one of these levels since back in the original Quake and its expansions. Before we can head up to the elevator into that Strogg ship, let's climb underneath this wall, head through this old abandoned tunnel, and... You didn't think I was gonna forget, did you? Alright, so we take the elevator up into the Strogg ship currently drilling into the Earth's surface, and this area is kind of a maze. There's 5 computers we need to find and interact with, and the whole ship is crawling with Strogg. And I'm not talking about just fodder Strogg either. We've got tanks, tank commanders, gladiators, medics, and almost 20 stalkers literally just crawling around on the ceiling. And a lot of these monsters are equipped with shields, which makes them even spongier than they otherwise would be. This is one of the only areas in this operation that plays a traditional metal track from Sonic Mayhem, which helps it stand out a lot from the other areas. Eventually, we are able to interact with each of the needed terminals to disable and retract the drills, which opens up a plethora of new avenues back down on the surface, including access to the dopefish. I showed it out of order, but whatever. The final level of Operation Ruined Earth is basically just a series of 3 different boss battles in a row, which I'm fine with. Starting with the Strogg Super Tank. If you're off-put that I'm calling these boss battles when they're really just named, beefed-up versions of standard enemies, then I feel you. I do. But they gave them names, so I'm basically throwing the terms boss and mini-boss battle around freely depending on where in the level they appear. All of them are relatively easy, and if you didn't accept them as genuine boss battles, I would understand. Now, playing through these in the order that I did makes this one the penultimate operation of the expansion, which is the way I highly recommend that everyone else also plays it. Dropping down into this super obvious boss battle arena where we finally find this operation's data disk, we grab it and face down the Strogg carrier. Destroying that isn't the end though, as we still have to board the ship and find the bridge, which is where we encounter the Strogg Mega Tank. Really creative names this go around, huh? Finally, once we kill that thing and clear our way to the Strogg bridge, we upload the data disk and transmit the data. Wait, what? Okay, so it turns out that on our way out of the Strogg ship shortly after disabling the drills, you can spot a brick wall near an already dead mutant and blow your way into another hidden tunnel system. Following this pipe will take you into this operation's secret level, which I missed because, to be honest, it's super easy to miss. Pumping Station 3. It brands itself as a sequel level to the Pumping Stations 1 and 2 levels from the Quake 2 base campaign, and I'm not sure why. Am I missing something? Why is it named this? Obviously it looks like those pumping stations, and I mean it clearly is a literal pumping station, but this station is on Earth, and those two were on Strogos. It is a pretty cool area though, and I like that it isn't a trial arena and is instead an old long-lost industrial area that looks as though it's been abandoned for years. It's only comprised of 2 rooms and one of them is just a small entrance area. This massive 2-floor arena is the primary room of this mission, and there is actually a boss here we'll need to destroy called the Ancient Carrier. So of course we huff a double damage power-up and make very short work of the old Strogg menace. What? Oh, I...
missed something. The Ancient Head.
It's not worth it. Crashing through the atmosphere, our Marine, whom we are never shown the call sign of, receives his orders, and we, the player, are about to begin an operation unlike any other we've seen before. We touch down in a canyon of sorts. Something is somehow different this time, such as the grass in a Quake II level. This doesn't look like Strogos, but more like one of the Strogos moons, perhaps. Our job is to locate and verify the status on Badger Squad, who went radio silent somewhere in this region. One massive thing to note is that this level, much like the levels we talked about in the last operation, utilize a track from the Quake II Nintendo 64 port, which is super cool and adds an immense level of variety to this operation. I'm surprised they didn't use more tracks across this expansion, to be honest, but the sparing use of it primarily in these last two operations does add a lot of character to them in a way that separates them from the rest of the game. Of course, it isn't long before we're inside of a mine, seemingly built within a volcano, and of course, loaded with Strogg. Once again, a staggering amount of the textures we see I didn't recognize from any of Quake II's levels, which gives off a stronger feeling that you're somewhere completely different. The layout is really linear, but very well designed. It flows well and features a lot of distinct visuals to help it all stand out. And I know I keep saying this, but playing these levels with no music is just something else. The lava here provides an impeccable atmosphere through its red glow, and the clash of stone and steel makes for a really compelling level to navigate. And probably my favorite part is this rock churner trap that we can activate at will in order to cross it and lure enemies after us, only to then turn it back on and watch them get crushed up. All of this leads us down a tunnel into this factory's cooling system, where we find ourselves even deeper underground. A boss rolls out to confront us called Overburden, and we face him down in this arena of large rocks surrounding this ornate stone pillar. Casting our gaze upon this pillar shows depictions of something that veterans of the series should recognize, but we're getting there. Deep within whatever mountain we landed on, we've come across some kind of ancient underground temple. Ornate triangular doorways sit before us, and the center door depicts illustrations of some kind. Trying to open a door, we're told an ancient evil whispers to us. Why does everything here look so not Quake II? Anyway, we fight our way through one of the most spectacularly designed arenas in the game, and again, the soundtrack for this level is super different than anything else we've seen so far, because it's nothing. Droning ambience. It's so fitting for the tone here. The way the stone floor has been architected in such a meticulous and angular design, and the murals painting the walls suggest this place was built in reverence to something. Also, this buried ancient temple is a passage to this operation's secret level. This is the final secret level and is another trial challenge. It's once again just based on a single room and is very reminiscent of the other secret levels of this expansion. Honestly, this looks way more like the Earth-based levels from Machine Games' Quake I expansion Dimension of the Machine than it does anything in Quake II, which I'm assuming they probably just reused the textures from that expansion in this one. No judgment, I think it looks great and fits right in. Either way, it's overall a very short secret level that you can kind of just cut your way through before heading back into the temple. This last push deeper into the rooms of the temple are also reminiscent of the original Quake in their design, which if you've been paying literally any attention whatsoever at this point, you know exactly why that is. This giant hammer thing seems to be mining for something, but I'm unclear as to what exactly that might be. But while we're down here, we enter a boss arena where we take on the Underminer, another powerful super tank that seems to be guiding this mining operation here. With that boss destroyed, we eventually find ourselves falling down a tunnel in front of the data disk we've been searching for. I guess now we know what happened to Badger Squad. Can't let it be for nothing. We grab the disk, activate a bridge, and fight our way through another dozen or so Strogg units until we locate a massive portal behind a door.
Computer updated.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Time to kill these tanks and see what's behind door number 3.
Computer updated.
So I know you've all been wondering how they're planning on wrapping up such an incredible Quake II operation like this, and let me tell you, it's certainly a bold decision. This is Modir. He's a shambler, in a boss battle styled like the ever so iconic Chthon boss battle from the end of Quake I's first episode. And we even kill him in the exact same way we did Chthon too. maybe Modier took over after the Quake Ranger dealt with Chthon twice in a row? This is a really fun little callback, and it's definitely nostalgic, but I'm pretty sure most people hated this boss battle in the original game, so reusing it for a Quake 2 battle is really funny. I don't have a problem with it though. I think it's fun, and it actually leads to the most interesting ending across any Quake episode or unit we've seen. We're back on the space station now, retaking the perspective of the Marine codenamed the Machine. His objective updates telling him to travel into the dimension of the Machine so he can kill the Strogg Maker. Not only does this tie directly back to that final Quake 1 expansion, which kinda hinted at the origin of the Strogg, but now, playing as a Marine codenamed the Machine, we're going in to put a final end to this madness. Jumping through the portal drops us into a familiar looking area as we gather a few weapons lying around before entering a massive stone arena. Immediately we're thrust into a boss battle against the Servitors of Creation, a super tank and a Hornet. This is the one level where I think Night Dive or Machine Games should have contracted a single original song to be played. For this, what is essentially a series finale, if I could have had my way, I would have had them contract Andrew Hulshult, just hear me out, to compose one original finale song that utilized riffs from the Trent Reznor Quake theme and put it in a style similar to the Sonic Mayhem Quake II score with a bunch of his own original riffs included. I have no doubt he'd have done it happily and for a reasonable price. Anyway, after we take down the Servitors of Creation, the acid pool below us begins to drain as we finally meet the Masters of the Machine.
It's you! It's you!
Yeah. It was all orchestrated by two lone shamblers who, if I'm understanding the murals correctly, were once servants of the ancient Eldritch Horror herself. This fight is actually a lot harder than I was ready for. You've got to really be giving it your all to beat these beasts, but with some persistence, this lone Marine can overcome the Masters of the Machine and put an end to this conflict for good. So yeah, that's how it ends. The Machine stops the Strogg Maker, but loses himself to the void for all eternity in a horrific ending that, to be fair, the expansion did warn us was coming. Thus ends the final expansion of Quake II, as 7 Marines work together to harvest the data needed to program the portal for one final showdown with the Masters of the Machine and finally stop the Scourge of the Strogg. So I have to mention that I have this kind of fan theory that the unnamed Marine from Operation Darkest Depths that lost his mind is actually Bitterman from the Quake II Vanilla campaign. I mean, we know he survived thanks to that ending where we see his hand coming up, and I choose to believe that he made his way to a ship and worked alongside with the Marine codenamed the Machine to partake in that specific operation. And since we can't see that Marine's name on his pod, that's what I'm going with. I mean, what more can really be said? It's easily the best Quake 2 campaign, and even despite my fatigue going into it right after the prior 2 expansions, still managed to blow me away. For Quake 2 fans, I can see how much of a treat this was to us, a total love letter, but even if you're just a casual fan of FPS games with Lovecraftian themes, then there's still some great level design and visual aesthetics to sink your teeth into here. Machine Games really delivered with this one. Although the story is a bit thin, as are all Quake-related stories, the coolest thing about the plot of this expansion is that it finally ties together the worlds of Quake 1 and 2 into a cohesive merged universe after 2 decades of speculation and frustration. The 2 Machine campaigns are the thread that unites these games and finally makes the total package of Quake 1 and 2 feel like 2 halves of a very long and unique whole. Though there have been plenty of other Quake games, some that reinterpret these 2, some that tie directly into them, and others that try to just do their own thing, these 2 games and their expansions are the baseline upon which all other Quake games would spin off from. So it only feels right that the final 2 installments in the series, both chronologically and in real-life release order, would bring it back to them to resolve the universe in a way that feels loving, passionate, and committed beyond a want to make money or cash in on a beloved IP. Well done to Night Dive, and well done to Machine Games. You did justice by the property you sought to work on, and who could ask for more than that? Okay, so while I know that did feel like a really solid wrap up to everything we've been talking about, we're still not quite done yet. Now that we've finished up our time with Quake II's canonical entries, there's still the small fact that Quake II's N64 iteration is actually an entirely unique campaign complete with its own maps, music, and narrative. So even though it's not actually canon to any of the other Quake games, as in they didn't even try to connect it since the Night Dive remaster just straight up calls it an alternate timeline, we still gotta cover it. And also the PS1 port too, a little bit later, but I'm just gonna touch on that one. Developed by Midway Games, the Quake II Nintendo 64 port shook things up from their work on the original Quake 64, which was more of a direct port of its PC counterpart with a few levels removed. Since that one didn't sell as well as they'd hoped and received some criticism following their high quality and original work on Doom 64, which was also a completely unique game using the Doom IP, Midway decided to go all in once again to create a new experience exclusive to those playing Quake 2 on the Nintendo 64. And I'm gonna go ahead and just say that I loved this version of Quake 2. It's so good. It might actually be one of my favorite experiences out of all of the Quake content I've covered so far. I would definitely say I enjoyed it more than most of the other campaigns, that's for sure. So the first thing I wanted to do was quickly take a look at the original N64 version itself to get an idea of how it all looked, since I'd never played it before doing so for this video. The menu is really cool, and the mega chromed out version of the logo spinning around is a choice, but I respect it. Also, it's interesting how you can customize your character like this by naming him and changing the color of his armor, which comes complete with different player portraits depending on your choice of color. For the multiplayer, of course, since this clearly doesn't matter in the single player. Getting into the game, everything looks great under the circumstances, but it just plays like ass. It's rough, and by no fault of its own. The Nintendo 64 controller is just ridiculous, and always has been, especially when it comes to shooters. They were doing the best they could here, but it's just so rough to play this when you've gotten used to how Quake is supposed to feel. The frame rate is abysmal, the movement is stiff, and the aiming is an entirely new challenge for you to have to overcome all on its own. And I'm not saying any of this to degrade this port, by the way. If this was still the only way to play it, I'd be all over recommending it, trust me. But it's not the only way to play it. And it's most definitely not the best way to play it, since Night Dive also carried over this entire campaign into their Quake II remaster. Unlike their Quake I remaster's take on the N64 port, there's no unnecessary CRT filters this time around, or really any distractors of any kind to speak of. It's just an optimal way to experience a wholly unique new Quake II campaign, and I highly recommend it. The entire thing is completable start to finish in just over 2 hours, so it's not even like it's a massive time commitment or anything either. I'm still gonna go ahead and cover it all level by level, just like I did with the other campaigns, so you can know what's going on in this alternate Quake II timeline. But I'm telling you now that these maps are much smaller, and the whole campaign is much shorter. We start off in the Strogg Outpost, where, unlike any other Quake campaigns, we don't actually get a drop pod to explain how we got here. We're just kinda dropped into this canyon as things are exploding around us, I assume due to a bombing run of sorts. Something that was carried over from the N64 port of this PC remaster is the far more saturated color palette. Look at this purple water and these deep reds and blues. I don't know exactly why, but both the N64 and PC versions of this campaign have much more colorful and atmospheric color palettes. It does make it feel a bit more cartoony, but it also makes everything feel far more alien and sci-fi, in a good way. It's kind of a breath of fresh air compared to what things have looked like across the last 4 campaigns. Also, I love these little in-level cutscenes that show us Bitterman's character model. Another thing carried over from the console version are these in-between level progression pictures to show the layout of the game's story and where we are. I adore this. This feels like the old in-level pictures from Doom, and is another contributing factor to this game's unique charm. This is so cool. Entering into the central complex, our job is to find some explosive charges, use them to destroy a security terminal, and then find the teleporter out. Again, I really just love how different this game looks. It's just so vibrant, and the way they use the textures makes every room feel more visually appealing to look at. I'm almost positive this is a result of how much smaller these maps are. I mean, every level can be completed in just a few minutes, and this probably made it a lot easier to focus on refining how each map looked and felt to play when compared to playtesting the far larger, interconnected areas of the PC version. We plant the explosives, blow up the security terminal, and then head for the teleporter to take us into the next area. So like I was just saying, this game doesn't feature any hubs or backtracking. Each level is its own linear step on the path towards the game's finale, and to be honest, I found this to be a refreshing change of pace after dealing with the prior expansions. I'd probably be a little bit harder on this game if I hadn't just experienced what Quake II is like when the intensity is dialed up to 11, but after playing what that feels like, there's something so enjoyable and relaxing about a more straightforward, fun-focused version of Quake II. I know it's shocking, but a game that just lets you shoot your way across straightforward levels without trying to obliterate you or trick you every 5 minutes is actually a good time. The mission here is familiar as well. Find the data disk located in this area. Simple enough. This part where we have to platform over these trigger lasers is really cool too, and there's a tank waiting for us on the other side standing between us and that disk. Once we grab said disk, we're able to find the elevator out of this stage and into the next one. Once again, our objective is simple. Find the terminal and upload the data disk. Something noteworthy about this specific level is that it shares a lot of its layout with a similarly named comm center level from Quake II's PC version, meaning players may feel a slight sense of deja vu when going through this one. It's like a way smaller, more condensed version of that level, but it still works great here, and we get a similar satellite animation when interacting with the terminal here as we did in the vanilla game. After uploading the data coordinates, we take another nearby teleporter from the planet's surface of Strogos up to a space station just above us. We're going interplanetary. Teleporters were present in the base game too, but they were used far more sparingly than we see them here. Quake II 64 does end a lot of its levels with a teleporter to easily explain how your character is getting from one location to another, but the PC version of Quake II, and even to some degree Quake I, tried to use teleporters far less, since apparently Carmack believed they were a crutch for bad level design. This game doesn't care about that though. Also, look how cool this big thing is. This is the station's gravity generator, and it's one of the coolest designs for a gravity generator I've seen in a sci-fi game. I can't imagine trying to deal with this low gravity level on the N64 controller in the late 90s though. That sounds nightmarish to me. There was some very obvious ambition for this game. I mean, look at how they programmed a Strog fighter to fly out of the hangar like this. Awesome work, Midway. Unlocking the elevator, we're able to head deeper into the space station into the next area. Oh, just missed it. Better luck next time. Our mission objective here is also simple. Find the station's generators and blow them up. I assume this is supposed to be a black hole generator since it resembles the one we saw in the PC version, which is cool because I love this design. Although it does look a little different, with a far less industrial, more sci-fi aesthetic to it. The same could honestly be said about this campaign as a whole though. There's 3 generators scattered across this area, and we'll need to fight our way to each individual one and plant an explosive charge on it to knock that black hole device offline. Once all 3 charges are placed, we're given 2 minutes to find a way off the station before it explodes, which is pretty easy since there's a Strog ship docked with the station that we can just board and fly out of here. That same Strog ship flies us off the station and ends up docking with a Strog freighter, however. Yeah, we're all over the place in this expansion, and I love it for that. Now, we need to get to the Strog moon, so we're gonna have to kill our way to the bridge and change this freighter's navigation charts to take us there. Are you seeing it yet, by the way? How visually distinct and pleasing all of these environments are to look at compared to some of the stuff we've seen across the other Quake II offerings? I don't think Midway gets nearly enough credit for the work they did on this game, to be honest. It's kind of a hidden gem within the Quake II remaster now. Anyway, we reprogram the freighter's heading and go back down to the cargo bay. So we're on our way to the moon, but we're gonna need to find a ship to take off this freighter to get down there. Oh, yeah, that'll work. So we gotta find that Strog fighter, which of course means crawling through the ship's sewer tunnels and fighting through a conveyor belt area, carrying supply crates. There's always a conveyor belt cargo area. Is cargo bay just another way of saying warehouse? It's always a warehouse. Everywhere is a warehouse. This isn't a sci-fi freighter, it's just a warehouse. It's not even Quake 2, it's just warehouse. Warehouse 2. So we end up taking a drop pod to the moon's surface instead of that starfighter, which would have been cool if we flew in on that though. I actually ended up liking these mine areas too. They felt similar to some of the sections we saw in The Reckoning in the way they're laid out and look, and that's because the devs tried to recreate parts from that expansion's command center level, which is also cool because it gives that air of familiarity to it for those of us playing through it all in order, although the slidey ice mechanic is still annoying, and I imagine induced severe rage on players trying to navigate this on an N64 controller back in the day. I'm gonna keep bringing that up because if you played this back then I'm telling you to give it another shot on this remaster because it paints it in a whole new light. Also, what's that big pointy thing? Stuff like this is what those first 2 expansions needed more of. Weird alien landmarks, things to help levels stand out from each other. Less warehouses.
Oh, come on!
Okay, yeah, we got warehouses. I'm pretty sure you have to include multiple warehouses and storage areas in your Quake 2 game or it doesn't count. We're still on the moon here and there's not much to say about these next 2 levels other than they're storage areas. Crates, crate carriers, we've seen this before. We do get our first super tank fight here though, and this exterior area looks great. The moon's atmosphere in the skybox looks fantastic, and we can find our first BFG here too, right before activating this laser. It's a great little boss fight. So we take out that super tank and move on to a different planet? Wait, we're still in the storage facility, and we just took a big elevator down deeper into the same building we were just in. Also, we start the level in a tram docking area, but not directly in said room, but in a hallway accessing the room. So we didn't ride this tram here, but this is also the same room from the lower hangars area in the Reckoning, but we're still back on the moon. Whatever, I'm not spending time on this level, let's move on. Oh, it's more warehouses with a conveyor belt that we need to activate to ride on.
Daring today, aren't we?
It's all storage areas. I'm not even leaving anything out. It's just rooms of crates and enemies, and pieces of it are taken straight out of the base game's warehouse levels too, so half of it isn't even original. We're back with this level though, opening on a pretty interesting train ride above a river running with hot lava and leading into the geothermal station we need to get into. There's also a quad damage power up here, and picking up power-ups in Quake II 64 immediately activates them, so there's no saving and using them when you want. If you grab a power-up, you have to fight it. I really like this area where we deactivate the cooling pump so we can use the pump's tube system to drop down into the next area. This is such a clever way to transition from one level to another. I love this. And we've got the return of the green water. Most of the water in this campaign is purple tinted, so when it's green like this, I feel like it stands out a lot more. Eagle-eyed fans of the franchise might notice how this level takes cues from the base game's detention and prison levels by using the same textures, a similar layout, and even featuring a cage of prisoners that lowers into the lava from the base game as well. Sorry guys. Also, can someone tell me why this Nintendo console game has more of the gory horror elements than any of the 3 expansions did? Look at this crusher machine just obliterating these marines like cattle. It's grotesque. I feel like these elements got lost after the vanilla Quake II campaign, so it's nice to see them present here in the N64 version. Moving on, we ride this conveyor belt into the next level. Quake II on the PC was at its absolute best when it embraced its own horrific implications and showed how horrific and evil the Strogg Menace are, focusing on the atmosphere, and we see that bleeding over here too in a big way. These levels feel like a straight-up horror game at times, with rooms showing Marines being tortured and experimented on, and being prepared for the Stroggification process. Where was this in the expansions? Even Machine Games failed to meaningfully incorporate these more gory elements. You only really see how evil the Strogg are if you play either the vanilla PC game or this N64 version. Or I guess Quake 4, but we're not there yet. Which I guess is fun, because having things be this dark on the N64 is just really amusing to me. The exit on this level is actually a train that we see physically depart and head down the railway. We pull up to a berserker, immediately jumping onto the train to attack us before entering into the rest of the bio-waste treatment. We get some interesting set pieces like this pipe system that we navigate through and interact with to transfer water. It's honestly a really short level, even for this game, and you'll end up cutting your way through it pretty quickly, but it does make for a great level, and it's very tightly done. Plays very well. The final level on this moon, or planet, or wherever we are currently, as I'm unclear on that, is another short one, but still really good nonetheless. The layout is particularly interesting here as well, with a ton of verticality that makes it feel almost like something we might have seen in a Quake I map for some reason. It also kind of reminded me of Daikatana, probably due to the green sludge everywhere. Both this level and the level before it are centered around this massive hatch that leads to the facility core, and disengaging the lock so we can open it and head down. So at the end of this level, we manage to get that hatch open and begin our descent into the core. Just like those last 2 missions, these final two missions feel like 2 parts of a single mission. I know that was a mouthful, just stay with me, because I also think they're some of my favorite looking areas that we've seen so far. A large portion of the level is designed around us navigating these moving platforms that take us up and down in order to progress. It's also kind of disorienting because it feels like you can seemingly go down forever, but when you get off, it feels like you've barely moved at all. And there's plenty of enemies trying to kill you all the while too, of course. Man, I cannot imagine trying to do this on the N64 controller, by the way. I said I was going to be bringing it up, and I meant it, because seriously, if your only experience with this game is from the N64 copy, please do yourself a favor and try the remastered version. This is a really cool build up to the game's climax though, and since we're pretty much at the end, getting to fight through all of these moving parts makes us truly feel as though we've entered into the machine to destroy it from the inside out. Speaking of, let's finish this. So this is pretty much just a boss battle arena. We load up on some ammo and resources with one final goal in mind. destroy the core. Though of course there's 4 boss enemies standing between us and that goal, referred to in-game as the Guardians. Quake II 64 doesn't feature the Macron, so instead we end up facing down 2 super tanks. Again, the colors and design of this arena are super unique to this game, and I really found it to be one of the coolest looking boss arenas across any of the Quake II content I've looked at so far. Upon destroying the 2 super tanks, the walls open up to send out 2 Hornets for us to demolish as well. And once they've been overcome, we ride an elevator up into the command core, and I presume we destroy it? It doesn't really show us anything blowing up or being shut down, so I guess we're just supposed to assume the core has been powered down and a lone Marine has escaped with his life. Okay, so I obviously loved this game. Or at least playing the remastered version of it anyway. It's not very long, but it's tight-knit and cohesive with some really unique elements that help it to stand out from its sibling campaigns. It's also more visually distinct than any of the others and features a lot of super fun layouts that feel great to play through. That said, it's really easy compared to all of the other experiences too. There's less enemies and they're a lot easier to handle, so if you're interested in trying Quake 2 but aren't super familiar with shooters, then Quake II 64 Remaster would make a great introductory kind of prologue episode before diving headfirst into the main game. Lastly, there's one more thing I need to talk about before we finish up our time with Quake 2, and that's the PS1 port developed by a short-lived studio called Hammerhead that only ever worked on 6 games before vanishing, this being one of them. And when I say vanish, I mean that I can't seem to find any information on what happened to this team beyond that the founders had broken away from a different studio called Traveler's Tales, a studio you probably know mostly for the LEGO games, in order to found Hammerhead before eventually going back to Traveler's Tales again. But that's just what I found because there's so little info about this studio or anyone involved at all. As for the game itself, I don't have as much to say about it that we haven't already covered in some capacity. Most of this port is actually just that, a direct port of the PC version, just with most of its levels missing. It's kind of a hodgepodge mutation of different things because it uses cutscenes and some music from the Ground Zero expansion. The first level is ripped from Quake II 64, but it connects directly to the original Quake II first unit. And the linear progression of the N64 game is gone, as this plays more like the PC version as well, featuring different units, each with a set of levels that you can freely travel back and forth between. The fact that they connected the opening level of the N64 game to the first unit from the PC version is really cool, but that's kind of where the uniqueness ends. Missions 2 and 3 are direct ports of the bunker and power plant units from the PC. Mission 4 is a pieced together port of the big gun level with a new area, the research lab and launch command levels into a new unit, and Mission 5 is just a direct port of the last 2 levels of the PC game together. So it's all stuff we've already seen before, and the only other standout inclusions here are the Arachnid, an enemy we covered earlier in Call of the Machine, and the Guardian. This enemy served as a one-off boss battle and is one of only 3 enemies that only ever appear a single time across all official Quake II releases, the other 2 being the 2 Black Widow Guardian instances from the end of Ground Zero. It was apparently supposed to be called a Strider according to the game's code, which is honestly a fitting name, but it got changed to the Guardian during development. It's a bit of a shame they didn't use this guy in Call of the Machine though. It's really cool, and there's nothing else even close to this in any of the other campaigns. It would have made an excellent boss battle instead of just reusing the super tanks, Hornets, and Macrons over and over again. I'd have used him in Operation Firewall personally, since not only is that where the Arachnid shows up too, but that ending arena where you fight another Macron looks similar to the area where you fight this guy anyway. They 100% should have just used this enemy as the system administrator instead of another Macron fight. Such a missed opportunity. There's actually an unofficial fan-made project called Quake II PSX that makes all of the PS1 port's content playable via the Quake II PC remaster, and these guys even went so far as to totally overhaul both the Guardian and the Arachnid with sleeker new models, textures, and AI behaviors, so they feel great to play. This is actually what I used to gather the footage of this port that you're seeing, and how I chose to play through the experience. Though I did get a little footage from the original too. So why should you play it if it's just the levels you've already seen from the original then? Well, because they may be the same, but they're also a little bit different.
We are the same, you and me. Well, I mean, we are different, but we are the same.
Most of the recognizable levels have areas removed, environments altered, enemy placements changed, and just overall play very differently than you may remember. Certain things have been changed too, making for a unique alternative way to experience the vanilla Quake 2 campaign. I'm now officially recommending that Night Dive reach out to these guys and utilize their work in the Quake 2 remaster. And also get Machine Games to patch in the Guardian somewhere in Call of the Machine. It would be so cool. So that's it. We started with the Reckoning and made our way to the end of every Quake 2 expansion, and my sanity is just about here. Quake 2 is an enormous experience, and covering all of this has been an equally enormous undertaking, eclipsing even the amount of work I put into the first Quake and its expansions. We've seen alien worlds, moons, space stations, and desolate locations even on Earth itself. We've fought corrupted humans, cybernetic monsters, and eldritch entities. And I think after all of this, with everything now behind us, I can, with full confidence, say Quake 2 is pretty good. Quake 2 and its expansions are far more consistent in their tone and design than Quake 1 and its expansions were, but far less consistent in their quality and enjoyability while playing. Even Dissolution of Eternity, the most panned of the Quake 1 expansions, was better than both of the original Quake 2 expansions. Call of the Machine is great, of course, and it feels great to play, but even that one isn't really perfect in my opinion. There's a few odd choices in there, like the complete absence of the Iron Maiden enemy type is odd, and I actually personally felt that the ending where we face down the so-called Strahd Maker was something of a letdown. Setting up such an interesting continuity concept and then paying it off with a boss battle against two Shamblers felt like a missed opportunity to more deeply expand on the connection between the first and second game. Now I have seen the trailers and footage for Call of the Void, an unofficial fan mod that goes all in on this idea by creating new enemy types of Stratified Quake 1 enemies and more fully combines the first and second game both visually and tonally. And while that's super cool and I do plan on streaming it sometime, I lament that we didn't see something kind of resembling that in a more official capacity in the remaster. Still, overall, Quake 2 is one of the most important FPS games of all time, and arguably one of the most important video games of all time. It set the stage for a host of other games that would come after it, while also serving as the concrete foundation for a plethora of other shooters to rise up in its wake. With all of that said, I have elected not to talk about Quake 2's deathmatch modes because it's extremely similar to Quake 1's multiplayer, only without the new addition of Horde mode as seen in the remaster. It's still a ton of fun, and I did play a couple of hours of it, but I found I didn't have anything to say on it that I hadn't said some variation of already when talking about Quake 1's multiplayer. And also, it was really just a primer for what would go on to succeed it anyway. The next installment in the Quake franchise, one focused strictly on the multiplayer facet alone. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed my completed retrospective of Quake 2. I have to admit, it was something of a challenge to get through and write these scripts and put it all together like this, but I hope you've enjoyed it and it was entertaining for you. I'm proud of it, but I'm also beyond excited to get into Quake 3 and 4 and eventually the other spin-off titles to fully and finally conclude my full series retrospective on the Quake franchise. I don't know where it's leading us yet, but I know that I'm definitely anticipating making those videos on the other Quake games. Quake 4, for example, is one of my favorite Xbox 360 games, so I'm just excited to be able to cover that follow-up to Quake 2 with all of this lore and all of these levels freshly in mind to see how it informs my opinion of Quake 4 now all these years later. If you want to be kept in the know when those videos release, along with whatever else I'm working on in between then and now, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the notification bell on. And also feel free to check out the Discord server, there should be a link in the description. Again, thank you to everybody for watching and for your patience with me as I've worked on these videos and put out completions and all of these other facets. I know this is kind of a strange way of going about it, but ultimately this is a means of feeding the algorithm in between my lengthy video production process. If I don't really make enough money to survive right now, so I have to make sure I'm releasing a certain amount of videos every month. I hope that you guys understand, and I really appreciate your comments and your likes and your subscriptions and everything. Seriously, it actually does mean the world to me, and thank you so much for putting up with it and for sticking this out with me. Can't wait to see you in the next video, but until then, that's all I've got for you.